everybody hear me okay? Looks like we're at 7 o'clock, so I will call the meeting to order. Good evening, Exeter. Good evening to everybody in the room. Good evening to those watching on TV and on Facebook and YouTube. And welcome to the Town of Exeter Select Board July 19th, 2021 Select Board meeting. I'd like to first introduce the board. To my far right is Selectwoman Lovey Roundtree Olaf. Good evening.
Hi, everyone.
And
Are these? Yeah, okay, there we go.
Vice Chair Selectwoman Molly Cowan. Good evening.
Hi, everybody.
Selectman Darrell Brown to my left.
Good evening.
Our clerk, Selectwoman Julie Gilman, will be absent this evening. And I am Nico Papakostandis. To my far left is the town manager, Mr. Rustine. Good evening.
Good evening.
And our recording secretary, Joanna Bartel. Good evening, Joanna. Okay. Start the meeting with public comment. This is an opportunity for the public to weigh in with comment to the select board. We do ask, though, that if your comments are relative to a discussion item or agenda item, that you wait until that particular item comes up. I will pause for a moment to see if there's any public comment, and if so, if you would just state your name and your address for the record. Good evening, sir.
Hi, Andrew Elliott.
Good evening.
And I live on Washington Street, 42. It's not specifically about the Brentwood Road intersection. I've had a chance to talk to a couple of you before, but it's about some safety improvements I'm trying to get the town to put together for Washington Street. I've lived on the street for 9 years now, and the volume and speed of traffic has just gotten exponentially bigger. To that point, worked with the police department. They did a speed survey there in June, 4 days. We had a total of 9,622 cars. So that's 2,400 cars per day on Washington Street with a recorded maximum speed of 49 miles an hour, posted 25. For those of you who don't know where Washington Street is, it's the intersection of 111 and 111A. It's a connector road between two major arterial roads here in Exeter. So 49 miles per hour in a highly populated residential area is just a recipe for disaster. The 50th percentile number on that was 24 miles an hour. So that means more than 1,200 people were going greater than 24 miles an hour in one day. So that's just way too many people going too fast. So, I mean, the cities are doing a lot of different things now, and I think I've talked to some of you about some ideas, but just wanted to bring it up to everybody's attention now. The things that people are doing are things like road diets, traffic calming. I'm recommending that the town put in some traffic calming, and I've been working with Jen Perry at the Department of Public Works, who's been very helpful, and but at this point we haven't seen too much progress. I know it doesn't happen overnight, but I think with some of the traffic calming in planning could be a really good idea. Specifically, chicanes is what I'm thinking. These are horizontal deflections, which basically make the road feel narrower, so people don't feel like they can go 50 miles an hour on the road. The reason why I'm recommending this is because they're relatively inexpensive, and also this is what a lot of towns have proven to reduce speed on the streets. And so that, or potentially another option would be a road, it's called a choker, and it's basically two of them where you basically narrow the road into a single lane road. And I know that'll be effective because on Washington Street, the only time people slow down is when I've parked my car practically in the street and my neighbor has done the same thing, and then cars have to negotiate with one another. So I know that's effective. There's also some additional benefits of when you add these chicanes, you could potentially add some additional trees, providing natural shade and replacing these very old trees. In Washington, they've already taken down 5 in the last 2 years that I've seen. Some are city trees, some are private citizens' trees. But Jay Perkins at the Department of Public Works said that he'd work with us to get new trees put into place. Currently, there are ways to get these improvements in the existing processes in Exeter, capital improvement projects and the existing budgets for sidewalks and things like that. But the fact is the quote from 2014, when they looked at the sidewalks last, was $130,000, and I think our budget's only $120,000, so it's not going to be something that's going to get done with existing means, really. I mean, you can say it will be, but I just don't see it happening since it hasn't happened since 2014. And just a point that speed survey in June school wasn't even in session, and also police presence was on the street 3 out of the 4 days. So even having police presence on the street is not gonna cut it. We need to have physical changes to the road in order to make it safe for all the residents on the road. To that point, I got together with my neighbors and put together a citizens petition, which I'm going to give to you guys here today, requesting that we raise and appropriate $260,000 for the design and construction of sidewalks, tree work, and traffic calming. And the reason why is I feel like if the budgetary concern wasn't a concern, then the planning could proceed a little bit faster. And it's not related necessarily to the Brentwood Road intersection, but that has made situations even worse. I've been talking to you folks for a couple months now. I think you've seen my emails or my face before. So I have this petition, and I'll just give it to you guys.
Okay.
That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Elliott.
Yep.
With respect to the citizens petition, this would be put on the warrant back in 2022 for the March election.
Yes.
And I appreciate you coming forward. I know you've met with a couple of select board members, and we've emailed back and forth. What I'd like to do is circle back. In addition to DPW, Director Perry and Highway Superintendent Perkins, have you spoken or met with any other town staff?
Well, I mean, I briefly spoke with Jay Perkins,
Okay.
and Dave Sharples. I've talked to him as well about it, yeah, I'm talking to anybody who will listen to me. quite
Okay,
frankly.
no, and we'd all like to listen. The reason I'm asking is I'd like to circle back with them and perhaps get an update on, what they've looked into so that we can maybe have a discussion on this as a formal select board agenda item in the future.
Yes.
And obviously, once that comes around, I have your contact information. I'd be happy to reach out to you.
Yep, it's on the petition, and yeah, just other than the police department, I've been working with Detective Bruce Page. He's
Great.
the one that did the speed study.
Terrific. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks. Is there any other public comment? Okay, seeing none, we'll move forward. There are no proclamations or recognitions. However, I would like to acknowledge the Exeter Junior Baseball League 9 and 11-year-old All-Stars, respectively, have advanced from districts to states to now regionals. So they will be competing with other states, and I want to congratulate both teams and coaches and parents and thank them for representing Exeter with the class and sportsmanship that they have. And we will look forward to updating you on hopefully some more victories moving forward. With that, we'll move forward in our agenda to the approval of our regular select board meeting minutes from the meeting July 12, 2021. I would ask first if there are any amendments or revisions to the minutes. Okay, seeing none then, I would seek a motion to approve the select board regular meeting minutes from July 12, 2021.
So moved.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. We'll jump right into our discussion items. We do not have any appointments this evening. I would invite our Finance Director, Doreen Chester, to come forward to give us an update on the American Rescue Plan Act funds. Good evening, Doreen.
Good evening. As the chairman mentioned, I'm the Finance Director, Doreen Chester, and I'm just here this evening asking the board to make a motion to accept the unanticipated funds from the ARPA, the American Rescue Plan funds. We were allocated $1,603,113 from the state level. They arrived at that calculation by looking at our 12/31/19 revenues for the year, inclusive of water and sewer funds, and it was about $25 million. We have not received any funding as yet. I applied for those funds through the state portal at the end of June. In speaking to some of my colleagues in different towns, no one has yet received anything. The state seems to be running about a month behind is what we're finding out. So hopefully we'll see something toward the end of this month on those funds. Did anyone have any specific questions regarding those funds that we're receiving?
Any questions for Ms. Chester?
Do you want to? Well, my question is, are they restricted? Are they unrestricted? Do we get to use them however we
No.
decide? Okay.
No, there's always strings attached. The guidance isn't finalized as yet. It's through the Treasury regulations. And mostly you can use it to make improvements for anything affected or that would be affected by COVID, maybe ventilation systems. You can use it for water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure, which is good. We have a lot of that going on. And then there's a whole list of other items, and I believe the town manager included that in your packet. So we do have to go along with the guidance. We will need to report what we're spending it on, and that starts this October of 2021, and every year thereafter until we expend all of the funds, and the deadline for that is December of 2024. So we do have a time frame too. I don't think, based upon everything I've seen, that we're going to have any issues probably expending those funds. We'll receive half this year, 830,000, I'm sorry, let me grab that number, this year. And the next, and they're calling them tranches, we'll receive the other half next year. But this evening, I was requesting if the board could make a motion to accept $1,603,113 in the American Rescue Plan Act funds as unanticipated revenue.
Selectman Brown, did you have a question?
Yeah, so in relation to the drainage emergency we have in the river, could we use this money for that?
Oh, for the siphons?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And then if we're reimbursed by some other EPA funds, how would that go?
I would assume, you know what, let me defer, let me look into that. I would assume if we got other funds at a later date, perhaps we would be able to shift that to another area of need that's covered by guidance, because I can't see us just turning it in and refunding it back to the government if we could use it in another place. That's my impression, but I will look into that for you specifically.
Mr. Chairman, just
Yes.
a quick comment on that, too. My understanding is that we should know about the congressional direct spending request. I was told sometime in July.
Okay.
But we'll continue to track that. Maybe that July date's a little optimistic. And what we could do is we could hold on to these funds, obviously, when we get them. Mm-hmm. And then once we know for sure whether we're in the hunt for the CDS funding, we can then sort of relook at this. I mean, that was the thought process that we had.
No, I agree. And I was actually going to ask you for an update on those because those were project sensitive, and one of the projects was the siphon. So I think that's reasonable to hold off and wait and see if we're eligible for that.
And we have not heard yet, but we will make more follow-up overtures about the CDS requests.
Okay. All right.
And are we in violation of anything in the meantime? Has anything been cited where we have to finish something in a certain time frame?
I'm not aware of any.
Okay.
Any other questions? Doreen, I'm sorry, I do have one.
Yes.
So I know that we get half of the money this year and half of the money in 2022. My understanding is it 2024 we have to spend the money by, or 2026?
I read 2024 unless they've extended it further. That
Okay.
was the last bit of information that I've seen.
Okay, I thought I saw 2026, but I know you'll keep up with that, so.
It's possible.
Whichever it is.
Yeah.
And I think that, obviously, before we make the motion, we want to make sure that once we've recovered or collected this money, that it's spent, and I know we'll have many discussions, I'm sure, but making sure that the money is spent the right way and responsibly. So,
Absolutely, and we also have to comply with our internal policy for single audit for federal funds received. So that'll be another thing I can forward to probably the Board of Selectmen. Sorry, I keep interchanging that, and all of the department managers, so that you can review that, and we have to stay in compliance with that as well as the Treasury guidance for this funding.
okay, great, thank you.
Yep.
Any last questions? If not, then I would seek a motion that the Select Board accept $1,603,113 in American Rescue Plan Act funds as unanticipated revenue.
So moved.
Second.
It's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
Thank
Thank you, Doreen. Okay. Moving on, last week at our select board meeting, we had the Swayze Park trustees join us, and we had a very productive discussion about moving forward with Swayze Park with respect to a lot of different things, including creation of a master plan and such. But one of the items that we discussed was the reopening of Swayze Parkway. As you all know, the parkway was closed in spring of 2020 due to the pandemic to allow folks to be able to be out in the fresh air, socially distanced, get exercise. The parkway was closed to vehicular traffic. The Select Board reviewed the closure many times over the course of 2020 and early 2021, and with the emergency order still in effect, the Select Board had the authority to continue to vote to keep the parkway closed to vehicular traffic. As you know, in June of 2021, Governor Sununu lifted the executive order, and we moved to keep the parkway closed through the middle of July to allow the trustees to come forward and have a discussion with the Select Board. One of the things that was discussed last Monday was public safety, and obviously the sudden reopening of the parkway to vehicular traffic would bring concern to public safety, since so many people and families and young children have been using the parkway to walk, to run, to bicycle, skate, etc. And I agree with that concern, and the Select Board agreed with that concern, so we moved to keep the parkway closed through this coming Friday to allow for a discussion this evening after Mr. Dean and I spoke with Council last week. And one of the things that we discussed with Council after hearing a conversation with the trustees and also from public comment was to consider closing the parkway one way. In other words, allowing vehicular traffic one way and then closing the parkway one way for folks to continue to utilize it without fearing the risk of traffic. Council advised that that is within the Select Board's authority to consider closing the parkway one way to vehicular traffic. It's town policy that to consider closing a roadway one way or making a roadway one way, we have to have 3 public readings, which includes taking public comment before the board would deliberate and vote. Tonight will be the first public reading. Our next meeting, August 2nd, will be the second public reading, and then August 16th will be the third public reading. Typically, the clerk covers the public reading, but in her absence tonight, I would ask the vice chair to read the public reading. But I would also ask the board to consider, and for full disclosure, I did speak with the chair of the Swayze Park trustees earlier this afternoon, and he was in agreement. I think it would be prudent for the board to consider keeping the parkway closed to vehicular traffic at the very least through the Friday after the third public reading. I would also ask the board to consider looking at the calendar. The following day, there's a festival that has been permitted. There's 1 week left before school starts, and then school starts. One idea, thing the board may want to consider is perhaps keeping the roadway closed to vehicular traffic through Labor Day at the latest. In speaking with council, the select board would be within our authority to do that because we do have the authority to close the roadway, the parkway, for a very temporary period of time due to public safety. And I think that the select board agreed last week that this is a very big public safety priority. So with that, I would open it up to questions or comments from the select board. And seeing none, then Madam Vice Chair?
Sure. So the first public hearing, it would amend to Chapter 3 of the Town of Exeter Town Ordinances, one-way streets and traffic circles, and hereby amended as follows. Add 301, one-way streets. Add the following to the table of one-way streets. Swayze Parkway, northerly from Water Street entrance to exit onto Water Street.
Okay, at this time, I would invite any public comment relative to this public reading. And if you would just state your name and address for the record, please.
Hi, I'm Susan Drinker,
Good
and I
evening.
live at 26 Franklin Street. I guess the question that I have is making the Parkway a one-way street sort of negates the safety of having a closed parkway. As you mentioned, the community has thoroughly enjoyed this space and embraced it, I think. A question I have, and friends that I've spoken with, and people I've spoken with through town, is how is it possible to get a warrant article to make a permanent closure, or maybe with a, I listened to your meeting, your last meeting, and there was a discussion by two of the trustees suggesting to have on the north side, a pull-in for parking to make the parkway accessible to everyone. And I know at this point it's not accessible to everyone, but I thought that was a really wonderful suggestion, and just don't know how to go about the next steps. Who would I speak to about forming a warrant article for the next
So
town elections?
I could try to answer that, Mrs. Stricker. Thank you for your question.
Okay.
As I said earlier, because the emergency order has been lifted, the select board can only has the authority to keep the parkway closed for a short-term basis, and that's solely for the public safety. So in order to obviously consider, because the trust itself has very specific language. It was written in, I believe, 1924, but it has very specific language. So you're absolutely right. In order, the select board does not have the authority to keep the parkway closed ongoing. However, it could be brought before the voters in March, and that's a conversation that we can continue to have. Whether it's closing it off, there were some very good suggestions at the last meeting. Obviously, the select board would want public comment. We would work in conjunction with the trustees, and obviously that's going to be an ongoing conversation throughout the end of the year in anticipation of maybe perhaps putting that on the town warrant if that is the appetite of the board and the folks in the public. But in the meantime, keeping in consideration public safety and the fact that people have enjoyed using the parkway, I'm just speaking personally for me. There are other members of the board that may have other thoughts, but I thought this was one way that the board had the authority to at least do something to allow the vehicular traffic to continue, because we don't have the authority to keep that closed much longer, but then also allow some space for folks to continue using it and just trying to do what's within our authority and try to keep folks happy.
Okay, so you can steer me in the direction of the warrant article then?
We will continue, working with the trustees. Mr. Dean and I have had conversations with council. There are steps towards that. Obviously, there'll be, we'll keep that on the agenda. We'll have further discussions. I mean, certainly anybody is able to put together a citizens petition, but I would say it,
I know, talk to the guy right there.
where those aren't due until January, maybe allow the
Okay.
board some time to work on it. But
Thank you.
certainly, we have received everybody's email, and it's great that everybody's being so thoughtful. Lots of great suggestions have come our way, and certainly we will listen to all of them and
Absolutely.
and look into them. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
June Fabre, 10 Chestnut Street. I too have enjoyed all the happy faces of the little kids riding their bikes and people of all ages. I'm retired and I walk there all the time. One thing I did look up, though, that I haven't heard mentioned so far is what the master plan says. And I'm quoting here that on page 31 under the section downtown, it says prioritizing pedestrians over automobiles is a difficult policy stance for any community to adopt as it turns a 70-year-old American paradigm on its head. Nonetheless, from an economic development perspective, the success of downtown relies first and foremost on retaining its identity as a great place. And then it also says on page 32 that people are recognizing the health benefits of being more active, and taking cars off the road improves our air. So what I say is, sure, a warrant article would be good, but in the meantime, so many people are enjoying it. It helps downtown businesses. People eat their ice cream in the park, they eat their sandwiches in the park, and I'd love to see Swayze Parkway remain closed to traffic permanently.
Thank you. Thank you for your comment, and all of your points are valid. However, there is a process because there is a trust involved. The select board just doesn't have the authority to keep it closed, but certainly ultimately bringing it to the voters, and if the voters, approve, then there are processes after that. It would have to go to probate court, I believe, Mr. Dean, correct?
That's right.
So, but your voices are heard, and all of your points are valid, and I appreciate you getting up and commenting. Thank you. Any other comment?
Hi, Ann Sermon, 14 Cullen Way. Just a question on that. So currently with the reading, you would make the parkway one way if after the third reading, if that passed. Then, I'm just trying to get the order of things. Then a citizen's petition potentially could pass that would say that it's not one way, that it's closed. And all I'm asking about that is how binding are citizens' petitions. So I'm a little concerned about that citizen's petition would be binding. Then how does that work against the trust that says it's a parkway? I'm trying to get the steps on this, because it seems like you're going to make it one way, but then a warrant article could change so that it's not one way, but then that would supersede the trust. See, so that's where I need some help with just the steps. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you for your question. So I'll tackle the timeline first, and that is, this is the first of 3 public readings. We will, at some point very soon, hopefully entertain a motion to extend the closure of the parkway to vehicular traffic for a short-term basis. A date will be given. I threw out a couple for consideration. The Select Board does have the authority to do that on a short-term basis for public safety reasons. If after the 3rd public reading, the board votes to close the parkway for one-way to vehicular traffic, then down the road before March, if there's either a warrant article and/or a citizen's petition, it would go on the ballot. If it's a warrant article, it's a warrant article, and then if it passes, it would go to probate court. If it's a citizen's petition, you ask a question that I cannot answer right now, and I would have to go back and speak with counsel along with Mr. Dean, but I will certainly get an answer. I don't know the answer to how binding a citizen's petition would be, but thank you for your question. Any other public comment? Mr. Dean, any additional comments I may have missed?
Nope.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any questions or comments from the board?
I'll just share my thoughts. I've been serving on this board since 2018 and have long been really interested in how to make this a more inclusive park and how to best use this. And I think that I started talking about this in 2018 and didn't get very far. And I'm really excited that we are having this conversation, able to use the parkway in a way that I do believe was intended with the trust, which is to have, people being able to enjoy it. I think that there are a lot of valid points about access and accessibility, and I want to carefully consider those things because I think that, to have an inclusive town and parkway means that we have to let everybody have access. So how do we make that happen while also, having a safe and fun place to be with your kids and teaching them how to ride bikes? And, it just opens up the space. And I think that what we've seen with the closure of the parkway is it doesn't hurt traffic. There's a road that goes right exactly alongside. And I admit, when I was young and 23, I used to take the parkway because it was pretty. And I didn't think about, there might be kids learning to ride their bikes. And it would be a drag for having me, drive down this. So I'm really glad that we're having this discussion. I think that it's really worth thinking through how to work with the trust, honor the trust in the intent it was given, which I believe is to not have it be a thoroughfare through town exactly perpendicular to another street that goes through town. So I want to do this in the right way. I want to do it in a safe way. I want to work with the people who want to enjoy the parkway the way that we have been able to during this pandemic. And also, work to make sure that it's really accessible. So that's my commitment. Thank you all for being here. I really appreciate the dedication and it's been so wonderful to use that space for festivals, for walking, for families. I think it's been really great. So those are my feelings. Happy to work with folks to make that happen.
Great. Thank you.
And I'll just jump in real quickly. From the beginning, I've always been a fan of having the parkway entirely closed off. So I think the pandemic was a positive boost in that direction, if anything. In terms of the trust and the language within the trust, I think it would be prudent to go back and perhaps a linguist could help translate what recreational vehicle in 1920, was it 4, would translate to in 2021, because my gut says that a vehicle going over 30 miles an hour adjacent to pedestrians and children and other things might not have the same parallel terminology, and I don't know if that's something that we could utilize to work the trust towards my favor, of wanting to have the parkway closed off, but it's something that we could look into, because when I look up recreational vehicle right now, the terminology is for an RV. So that's what a recreational vehicle is defined as today. So that's something that perhaps when talking to council, we can also add into the conversation.
Yeah. Excellent point. Thank you.
Right.
Mr. Chairman, I don't think anyone's talked about, with respect to the roadway, I just want to put a label on it, the discontinuance of the road. That's what we're talking about, I think, when we're talking about closing it permanently, and that's what would take the town meeting vote. And the other point I just wanted to raise briefly is, since 1979, the Select Board have actually had the authority to terminate the trust at its discretion. That was something that was discussed back in 1979 and led to, I believe, the current MOU between the Swayze trustees and the Select Board. So that is an option that we could also explore, as well as the mechanics of how that might work, or whether it's in the town's interest to do that.
Okay.
Can I ask a question? So does that mean terminate the Board of Trustees as well if we terminate the trust?
I believe, my understanding is that eliminating the trustee board would require a vote of town meeting.
Okay.
Because town meeting created them.
So, but we as a select board could terminate the trust.
That's correct.
Which wouldn't then terminate the trustees.
It would,
no,
they would have no role, so
Right,
I think
okay.
in a de facto way, it would have that result.
Yeah,
Right. Eliminating the trustees, we'd have to go to
yeah,
vote.
right, sure.
Thank you, Mr. Dean. Selectman Brown? Anyone?
Mr. Dean, is there a reason that we didn't pursue that further from 1979 to now?
I'm not aware of any reason, either pro or con on that. I think part of it is just history, and I'm sure it's been revisited every so often since then, but there's no hard and fast reason that I could find in the files that said why or why not at that time.
Okay.
So for the sake of discussion, what would the select board have to do, or what process would entail terminating the trust?
That is something I would have to get the answer to.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Worth looking, at least getting an answer to that since it was brought up.
Sure.
Okay. Any other public comment with regard to the first public reading? Okay, seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board. The current motion expires the closure of the parkway to vehicular traffic effective this Saturday. So I would entertain a motion, or at least have discussion with consideration on dates to which we extend this through.
I would be in favor of closing it to traffic through the end, or through through past the start of school. If we can do
Labor Day
that.
after, I can't.
Yeah, Labor Day would
Okay, so
be
then Labor-
September 6th, I believe, Mr. Dean?
So like the Monday after Labor Day?
I think so, yeah.
I'm not sure. I can check.
Yes, it is, September 6th.
Yeah.
September 6th is Labor Day.
All right. I move that we close the parkway to vehicular traffic through through Monday, September 6th,
2021.
2021.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Next public reading will be on August 2nd. Thank you, Selectwoman Cowan.
Sure thing.
Okay, moving on to our next discussion item. This is a continuation of the discussion on the Epping Road, Brentwood Road intersection. We met approximately a month ago. Mr. Sharples came up and gave us a summary and an update on the project. We heard from folks from the neighborhood. The board deliberated, asked questions of Mr. Sharple, asked Mr. Sharples to come back to the board. I know he's here with some information. There's a memo from Mr. Sharples in the packet. Dave, I'd like to hear from you, and maybe the board can ask you some questions. We can open it up to public comment. I would ask, though, moving forward to public comment, we've heard the concerns that neighbors have, and based on those concerns and based on the discussions we had, we've given Mr. Sharples some homework to do. So I'd like the public comment not to be a rehash of what we've already talked about, but maybe ongoing conversation. Everybody will have an opportunity to speak. We ask folks to be considerate of others. If you've spoken once and others haven't spoken and you want to speak again, I will allow that, but let's give everybody an opportunity to speak. And again, everybody will have that opportunity. So, Mr. Sharples, good evening.
Good evening. Thank you. I have a few, Dave Sharples, town planner, and I have a couple people that I want to identify that are here tonight. I have Stephen Haas, the design engineer from Hoyle Tanner Associates. I have Todd Clark from Hoyle Tanner Associates, and also on Zoom, Jason Plord from VHB. And I'll get into why he's there, but they're all here to answer any questions anyone may have, because the HTA is the design engineer, and VHB, I'll explain, did a kind of a third-party review. So I'm just going to take a little bit to go, through my memo, because I think I gave you like 66 pages, so sorry about that, or 63, I think. So I'll just briefly go over that. And I completed my research on the questions asked of me at the June 21st Select Board meeting regarding the TAP grant, and more specifically, the Epping Road, Brentwood Road, Columbus Ave intersection. The Select Board asked me what, if any, repercussions there may be if they decided to reconstruct the intersection. I also wanted to address some of the comments made at the last meeting, and I would like to address the process that we went through, followed by what I found out about the status of the grant funding if the intersection is changed. And in addition to the process and grant implications, I did inform the Select Board at the last meeting that I would seek input from VHB, who recently completed an Epping Road corridor study that went from this intersection up to the Route 101 exchange. And I received an email from Jason Plord, a traffic engineer, and I included that in your packet for your review. And as I said, he's here if you have any questions. So the process, I wanted to reiterate the process the town followed for this project. The process that you need to follow is set forth in it's called the Local Public Agency, or LPA Manual, for the development of projects. It's issued by the New Hampshire Department of Transportation, and the LPA Manual lays out the procedures for implementing projects that receive grant funding through NHDOT. I wrote and received a grant through this program, and I am bound to follow all the steps during the process. Regarding the public meeting component of the grant, I followed the LPA manual, and we held a local concerns meeting. This meeting is intended to allow members of the public to hear the general overview of the program funding requirements, to find out the proposed schedule of the project as identified from the project scoping meeting, to obtain an overview of the sponsor consultant's understandings of the project area and potential issues to be addressed and overcome, and to provide comments on the proposed project. And we held that meeting, and a few of the direct abutters did come. This meeting leads to the development of a purpose and need statement. The purpose and need statement is the backbone of project development because the identified alternatives will be measured by their ability to address the project's identified purpose and need and its impact on the natural and cultural environment. It is important to note that no design of any of the alternatives has taken place at this initial local concerns meeting. As such, we notified only direct abutters because we didn't know of any impacts beyond the project area at that time, as no design work had been completed, so we weren't aware of any impacts. Hoyle Tanner Associates, after the first local concerns meeting, started the design process, and they came up with two alternatives for the intersection, as we had to get pedestrians safely across. Prior to this project, there were no crosswalks at this intersection since the sidewalk on Epping Road ended at the intersection. However, now that sidewalks were being extended north on Epping Road, we had to develop alternatives to get pedestrians safely across. Once the alternatives were developed, we scheduled the second public forum. When I saw that one of the design alternatives changed the traffic patterns at the intersection, I requested that Hoyle Tanner Associates create a flyer for the second meeting and asked them to send it to everyone that would be impacted, that we felt would be impacted by the project. I reviewed the draft flyer and requested that they add a note in bold that states one of the alternatives would change the traffic patterns at the intersection. I did attach the flyer that was sent to 112 property owners. I did also include a list of everyone that was sent a flyer and the receipt from the postage paid. It was asked at the select board meeting if this was sent via certified mail return receipt, but it was not. This would have cost approximately $750, and it isn't a requirement of the LPA to even send out the flyers, and we felt $700, regular mail is, we felt confident that it would get there, and we didn't need any record of the receipt. We also engaged in however, we did feel, we sent the flyer because we felt it was important to get people aware of this potential change. We also engaged in a social media campaign. We put a survey on Slido.com. I knocked on doors to speak with those I thought would be the most impacted by the project. And then, as noted in the attached engineering study on page 9 by Hoyle Tanner Associates, quote, attendees of this meeting expressed strong support for the reconfiguration of the Epping Road, Brentwood Road, Columbus Ave intersection to provide improved pedestrian accommodation, end quote. We also received 5 comments via slido.com/Facebook group that are listed on page 202 in the Appendix D of the enclosed engineering study, and I won't read them, but one was a question, and the other 4 all expressed support for option 2, which was the option that was constructed. I also took every opportunity to highlight the project when I appeared at televised meetings such as the Planning Board and Select Board. Around this time, I did receive 2 correspondence. One was from a Select Board member at the time, Don Clement, and the other was a Planning Board member at the time, because I asked, I showed them what this, it wasn't you Select Board, most of you weren't here, but and I said what we're doing, and I did receive comment from one Select Board member and a Planning Board member, and you will note that they both preferred the option that is being constructed. I also sent the alternatives to the Police Department, Fire Department, and Public Works for their review and comment. All of them either had no issues with the alternatives or preferred the option that is being constructed. This option was also reviewed and approved by Federal Highway and New Hampshire DOT. In addition to the project meetings, I was told about a neighborhood meeting that took place several months after the public forums. I was also informed that there were some questions at the meeting, and it was discussed that folks should reach out to the town for further information or to provide additional input, and I did not receive any correspondence after the neighborhood meeting. In summary, I believe we followed the LPA process to the letter and went above and beyond by sending out flyers, mentioning the project wherever I could, and soliciting feedback, knocking on doors, using social media, issuing a survey, and conducting a traffic impact analysis. From these activities in the public forums, the town did not receive one single comment in favor of option 1. This project was vetted by Federal Highway, the New Hampshire Department of Transportation, the Exeter Police Department, the Exeter Fire Department, the Exeter Department of Public Works, Hoyle Tanner and Associates, the Exeter Planning Department, the Exeter Planning Board, and the Exeter Select Board, and the public. Every comment we received regarding this intersection during the design process was in favor of the option that is constructed. If this was insufficient to move ahead with the configuration under construction, then I would encourage the town to consider adopting a policy on public engagement that staff can follow when doing similar projects in the future. On a final note about the process, I received 3 unsolicited emails since the Select Board meeting where this item was discussed, and I did include those in the packets. And as you will note, 1 is against the new configuration and 2 are for it. So that was the process, and I'll just quickly go over the grant implications and then open it up to any questions. I did speak with New Hampshire Department of Transportation, explain the situation, and then asked them what would happen if the town decided to remove the improvements at the intersection and reconstruct it differently. They informed me that since we did have another option in the engineering study, we could go back through the local concerns meeting process and the NEPA process, which is the National Environmental Policy Act, and it's too lengthy to explain, but it's a federal process where you need to check all your about historical and cultural and social impacts and go through that process. It's all set forth in the LPA manual. It is important to note that the alternatives would have to go through the process again. So it wouldn't be, you couldn't just go back, you would have to go back and do the same thing with multiple alternatives and go through the process. And if the result is the same with option 2, if that survived the process like it did the first time, then I guess it would be over. We wouldn't, it would be constructed, and that's all we would have to do. However, if option 1 became the preferred alternative, then we would need to go through the review processes set forth in the LPA manual, and it would have to survive the purpose and need and the NEPA process and so forth. Assuming this option got through that process and met the purpose and need statement and the NEPA, then we could move ahead with construction, assuming we could secure the necessary right-of-way, which I'm not convinced we could, but we would need to, because we needed a lot of easements, I think 16 for this project. We would need easements for option 1, and that is beyond the town's control. We have to have property owners agree to that. So I wouldn't say that we could, definitively get that if we went to the different option. And DOT informed me that if we went through this process, then they would not seek reimbursements for the funds already spent. So that's the key. If we would have to go through that. If we didn't go through that process, then they would seek reimbursement of the funds we already spent, which I ballpark at about $250,000, right? Yeah, about $250,000. They would, well, 80% of that, so that our 200, is that 200? Yeah, 200,000, they would seek that back. But if we go through the process, they wouldn't ask for reimbursement. However, they will not participate in any funding for the process, going through the local concerns, the NEPA process again, the redesign, the reconstruction, they wouldn't participate in, it would be solely at the town's expense. I asked Hoyle Tanner to provide an estimate on what this process would cost if option one was chosen and ultimately constructed, if it survived the process I mentioned. And I enclosed an email from Stephen Haas, the design engineer, and you will note that he estimates the total cost would be between $245,000 and $250,000. So I believe that answers your questions and did your research.
So that I understand correctly on that last bit that you discussed, if you go through the process that you just described and option one is pursued, the town of Exeter would not have to reimburse the federal money that we've already received. However, moving forward to construct option one would solely be 100% on the town of Exeter.
Yes, not only to construct it, but to go through the process.
The whole process.
The local concern, host the local concerns meeting, develop the design and the alternatives, go through the NEPA process, and then construct it. That all would be not.
And that is just $250,000. I'm rounding up.
to $250,000.
Okay.
That's the additional amount.
Correct. That's what it would cost. Yes.
That's funny.
So
That's the estimate from Hoyle Tanner, who's here, if you have any specific questions about that.
So either way, we're out $250,000.
No.
I mean, so if we don't follow the process for changing the direction of the road construction, then we have to pay back $250,000.
200 roughly.
280%.
Okay.
But then you would have to
Start the whole process all over.
Well, no, you wouldn't have to go through the process. Then you cut DOT loose to say, okay, we're not meeting the grant funds. Then you could pay for it on your own, and you wouldn't have to necessarily go through the NEPA process.
And what's that
But it would
cost?
still, a couple hundred.
Reconstruction after that?
Yeah, and the design and reconstruction. It's in your email. A couple $100,000 I'd ballpark for that. So you could be out, $400,000 if you don't follow the process. So I think it would, at the end, it would be cheaper to follow the process and not have to reimburse any grant funding if you were to pursue option one.
Right. Either way, it's not cheap.
And so the board understands following the process procedurally, how long, what kind of time frame are we looking at? Like, estimate, I mean, just.
Wow, that's a good question. I mean, I thought of that. The X factor is the right of way because, it took me, many visits, many knocking on doors, many phone calls, many to secure easements. Because,
and you can't even guarantee that you'll get them.
Correct. So I would probably say 18 months.
And that's before construction even starts, presumably, or?
Yeah, because the DOT and the federal process, I mean, it's been 3 years since the public meeting, and people say that's a long time, and I completely appreciate that. But the federal grant process is, it's very, I mean, it's all I's, T's, everything you do, there's a step, there's a step-by-step process, and every step takes time, and once you're done every step, you have to submit it to get reviewed by New Hampshire DOT, Federal Highway, then they provide comments and feedback, sometimes it's 4 to 6 weeks, you don't hear anything, then they send comments back, then you respond to those comments, and then they wait another 4 to 6 weeks to come back and say, oh, okay, and then you request a notice to proceed to the next step, and then they review that for a couple weeks and send it back saying, you are award, they give you your notice to proceed letter. So each step in the process is.
And we just went through this similar process with Kingston Road. I mean.
Yeah, Kingston Road, we've been, 10 years now, I believe, that
if not,
close to it, since the grant.
Mr. Dean, funds of the amount of $245,000 or $250,000, would that, first of all, we don't have that budgeted for 2021, I'm sorry.
Yes.
But wouldn't that amount have to go on town warrant anyway?
That would be my view of it, this magnitude of expenditure, yes.
Mr. Sharples, kind of Well, it's a unfair question. I think if you don't know the answer, you don't know the answer. You can find out. If the town did anything other than leaving it alone, okay, whether it be putting it back to how it was, going back to or reviewing option one, either the procedurally correct way or just going about it ourselves without that. In your opinion as a town planner, and again, if you don't know the answer, if you could find out, do you think this would affect any future federal grants for the town of Exeter?
Well, I would hope not, but that's a tough one to answer, because that gets into the head of people that are making the decisions. Then I wouldn't know. I don't even know if I could find out for you, but...
Not finding. I mean, obviously, no one's going to answer the question, but I mean, just based on your experience and speaking with peers and colleagues, I mean, I would hope not either, but, playing devil's advocate of the feds, they look at the town of Exeter, well, why are we going to give them a grant if they're...
If you don't perform on grants, then it's probably going to affect them, when they evaluate future applications. I would say it definitely is not going to help you any, put it that way. It can only hurt. They could take that into consideration. I know they take, if you don't perform on a grant, like if you don't pass, you get a grant and then you don't spend the funds, you don't keep up with the project, they're not going to give you, they're not going to consider you for future grant funding. I know that, but I don't know if that's this, analogous to this.
So in this case, where procedurally the town did everything correctly and funds were not misallocated or misrepresented, then if the feds were looking at this in the future, though, I mean, I would think those would be two no-nos, right? I mean, and that is not the case here. I mean, certainly, we'd talk about this later, but certainly there are things we've learned from this that we can either improve on or do in a different way, in terms of all different, we'll get to that later. But before we open it up to the public, any other questions or comments from the board?
Are there any things that we can do preemptively of losing, spending any more money to get a better read on the larger population who lives in that area? Like, I just...
I don't know. Yeah, maybe. I mean, I'd have to think about that. Like, besides, like, just knocking on doors and asking people, but then that has its own issues, too, because I've tried that before, and that's
I understand, but I also think that, before we make a decision about things, like, if we go in the direction of where we now have to rely on people buying into allowing... I would like to know before we make a decision. So if we're going with option one and changing the whole plans, and it's going to be, a change in the amount of money that we're having to spend, I want to know that 60% of the people who live there are in favor of it before we start that whole really expensive process. And I see that there are a lot of people here today, but this is I would assume a small subsection of those who have voices in the matter. So I think it's imperative on our part to do a little more footwork, and I don't know how we do that. But I would love to make sure that we're hearing from people before we do this again.
Yeah, I mean, there's thousands of people that use that intersection every day.
I know. I don't know.
I can, yeah.
I put out suggestions that I don't know how to actually see through. But
I've been trying to figure that out. Yeah, I've been working on that for a long time.
We can be the first town that's run into this situation. So I don't know what other people have done. Either way, it's going to cost us a lot of money. So I just want to make sure that whatever money we're spending is the right more money.
Well, it doesn't. If you let it sit.
Oh, right. Obviously, if we
because you said either way there is. Okay.
You're right, and so if we then find that out, and I know that those who are sitting here right now aren't in favor of just letting it sit, but I would hate for I don't want to be that person who says yes, let's go ahead and do it, and then we make the change, and then we're back here in a year, and then we have a whole new group of people who were like, why did you do that? No one told us. How did this happen? We were on vacation. It was the summer. Kids were out of school. Like, I don't want to repeat this. So I want us to do it right. And if we have the time to do it, I want to take it.
And I just wanted to point out a couple of things, because I didn't mention in my memo. May I?
Please.
From Chief Poulin, because he was looking at it, because Chief Shoup preferred, had sent me an email, a few years ago, and he definitely preferred the reconfiguration because of the accidents out there, and it's in the, it's attached to Jason Plord's VHB's letter. He, in his VHB study, did crashes, and so did the police, and this was from the police. Crash data was taken from the intersection of Epping Road, Brentwood Road, and Columbus Ave, as well as the individual roads, to determine if any crashes resulted from the intersection. From January 2010 to May 24th, 2021, which was the implementation of the new traffic pattern, the results were 55 motor vehicle accidents resulting from the intersection, 12 motor vehicle accidents resulting in injury. Since the implementation of the new intersection, which hasn't been that long, granted, a couple months, no reportable motor vehicle accidents have occurred, and prior to the implementation of the intersection, there were an average of 5 accidents per year. That's the third highest town-owned intersection. That's the third highest average crashes. That's the third worst intersection for vehicular crashes in town. The only ones are Headard on Water Street and Portsmouth Ave. And it definitely wasn't, like I said before, there was no perfect solution. It's definitely, when you have before you had 3 minor intersections unsignalized, all right next to each other. Basically, we turned that into 2. So that was kind of the thinking behind it. We felt it would be safer from a vehicular standpoint and from pedestrians crossing it.
So, Mr. Sharples, we've talked about the cost, we've talked about federal grants and different options, but ultimately this project came into fruition for the enhancement of public safety, particularly pedestrians. Short of leaving it as it is, whether you pursue option one or 2 different ways, or you tear it down and put it back as it was, all of those options will take time, possibly could have to go on the warrant. It's not going to happen tomorrow. My question is, for the sake of public safety, can we do some short-term things to mitigate? I've driven through there, and a couple things. One thing that caught my attention is Brentwood Road. Could we put a stop sign at Brentwood Road?
You can, and we had talked about that.
Can we and will we, or?
Well, let me tell you, and then you respond to me on that one. Stephen Haas and I, the design engineer, when he came back with that alternative I mentioned that. I looked at it, I said, wait a minute, because before you had this mandatory courtesy, because it was based on stop signs. You had a stop sign and you had one possible lane to go in. So people on Brentwood Road would stop and then go, and then someone in Columbus would go and Brentwood Road would go, and that stop sign made you courteous. Now, when you remove the Brentwood Road stop sign, which isn't needed from a traffic standpoint, because there's no reason, there's no conflict that you're stopping, because before you used to come across Columbus, so that's why you would have to stop, because that could be a conflict, so you stop there. Well, now you just go up, and we thought, okay, we can always add a stop sign if your people aren't courteous, because some people on Brentwood Road, if they learn how to use the intersection, they could let people out of Columbus. But I've heard that that's not really happening.
The reason I'm asking the question, I stopped. And I stopped, and I looked, and I said, where's the stop sign?
Yeah, and I emailed the lady that like a month ago or so, a month and a half ago, that we've been emailing back and forth, and I asked her, I said, do you think a stop sign on Brentwood Road? But I talked to Paul Vlasic, the town engineer, and he just suggested to me, he's like, listen, you don't have striping yet, you don't have the permanent signs, it's not, completed yet and working. His suggestion was just, complete it, let it work, and then if you need one, add one. but we could add one, along with the package when we do the striping and so forth, because that'll make that mandatory courtesy, and it won't back up Columbus as much, because you'll have to, as on Brentwood Road, you'll have to let people on Columbus get into that left lane, because if someone's up one car and you're Columbus, you're so close, you can't get behind them. You're waiting here until they clear, and if they clear and someone else comes up behind, you'll never get out.
I mean, I'm not an engineer, so I'm just asking because I stopped thinking that there should be a stop sign there, and when I looked, then there wasn't. So let me ask you this, would putting a stop sign there be unsafe?
I don't think
would it
so.
just enhance safety, correct?
Anytime you slow traffic down, it generally makes, you stop them, and they're not rolling, and that could minimize any, someone trying to, come out of Columbus when someone's coming to, and then, and it'd reduce that conflict because they both have to stop. So then they're presumably not, one isn't going that fast because they're both stopped. Neither is going that fast. So I certainly could do that. I mean, I would want input from the engineers, but we had talked about that initially, about possibly needing that after implementation and reviewing it at that time.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll waste my closing line early. Again, not being an engineer. I know that the town engineer has looked at this, and I completely respect his endorsement. I mean, I'm not an engineer, but just I'm looking at this as an example of maybe something that looked really good on paper, didn't come out quite the way it might have thought to have been. So I would ask you, would it be prudent, I know DPW didn't have a whole lot to do, would it be prudent to, in addition to considering a stop sign at Brentwood Road, maybe having Paul and the Highway Department look at anything they could tweak to improve it? I mean, I don't think that would hurt. Mr. Dean, would that be something for consideration?
I mean, we could ask. We could certainly ask them to take a fresh look at it. I think Dave has mentioned that Public Works has had a bite at the apple, but I think another bite would be fine.
And the only reason I bring that up is, as I just stated, anything other than keeping it as is going to take time. So in the meantime, I think it's fair to everybody in the community to take a look at what short-term improvements can we make to possibly stop sign, having DPW look at it.
Yeah, no, I'm all in. I think the stop sign is, I think that's a good idea. I just, when I talked to the people that installed the stop signs, they said, hold off. And we had talked about that when it was first designed. But it seems like, people that just chimed in back here, they're not being courteous and letting people, they're just going and then stacking up, and then you're going to sit at Columbus for a while.
Also can't see well when you're coming out of Columbus. Right. So if they're not stopping, you have to get up in front of them to even see them coming. If they're just going, then that's dangerous. But if you had a stop sign, at least they had to slow down, so you don't have to.
Great.
I would say just, I don't know, my knee jerk was like, I kind of wanted to keep it there originally, but I was like, well, okay, from a traffic standpoint, that you go by the standards, you don't need it, but that would make a lot of sense.
Yeah, when we discussed it, it does make a lot of sense.
Good.
Both from the site distance issues that she just mentioned.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. Okay. Yeah. Before we open it up to the public, any other questions or comments from the board? Selectman Brown?
Mr. Sharples, I just had more questions about grant performance. So as we move forward and do other projects, so are there questions on the permission to proceed thing with other projects that you need to get from DOT? Is in there, are there questions about past grants? About, when you say performance, can you say more about what kinds of things are asked about?
Well, DOT, when they give you grants, when anybody gives you grants, they expect you to perform and spend the money in a timely manner, because most of the places that you get the money directly from, it doesn't come from them. It's funneled through them as a state agency, and it comes from some federal pot of money, whether it's the Department of Interior or, Federal Highway in this case, or, and so forth. So, they have to they get a certain amount of money allocated to them every year, and then they have to show that it's spent. And they don't like when people don't spend the money, because then, then they risk not getting the full funding the following year because you didn't spend all that we gave you. Why do you need that much? So they're always looking for people who perform and actually carry through their projects in a timely manner and spend the money and so forth. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, so then...
Yeah, that's what I was talking about when you perform. You follow through, you do it, and you follow all the processes. You don't skip steps, you don't do things that, until you get approval for, you don't go ahead of, with design until you get the notice to proceed, and, all that is performing, is basically doing everything they ask to do, all the grant processes, all the requirements, fulfilling those, and doing them in a timely manner, and expending the funds and getting the project to fruition, constructing the project and closing it out. That's what they want to see.
Got it. And are there any feelers for us, like, so we allocate the money, we spend the money, the contractors execute, and then other questions about, okay, the money was spent, it was spent properly, now what's the shelf life of what happened? So other questions in future grant applications about after the project's complete, like, are there benchmarks for how long is the thing that we gave you money for been up and running? If that makes sense.
Generally not, because there is some attachments with federal money that you incur, just because you take it, and in the project agreement, you have to maintain that project, that whatever you did, whether it's a park or, a sidewalk or something. But generally, when you move on to a next grant, it's all about the criteria for the next project, and it doesn't ask you about that's something that they probably, when you get a grant application from someone, if they didn't perform, it's not like, did you perform on a grant application? They just know that and might be hesitant to, provide you additional funding if you couldn't, carry through on your last commitment.
Yeah. And then the last question, this is the main shot for funding. It's not like you can go to another source for state and federal. This is where you're going for your next sets of grants, same source, right?
Well, I go everywhere. Whoever has the money, I'll ask for it if it fits a project that's consistent with the master plan and so forth. But a majority of funding, I usually go through the Transportation Alternatives Program every couple years. I don't think we will until we have to close out the Kingston Road project. But
is it that this one was primarily pedestrian, which is why it didn't? Did it go a different way because the focus was pedestrian?
No, they're all, Transportation Alternatives Program are pedestrian bicycle. It's not automobile oriented. It was actually difficult to convince them of paying for the intersection reconfiguration, because they had to see that the primary purpose was getting pedestrians safely across. We didn't really go into it thinking we want to solve this intersection or address the vehicular component of it. We just needed a way to get pedestrians safely across it. And then, two options were developed and went through the processes that I highlighted earlier, and that's how it became. So you're not even supposed to, like, if we came up with a roundabout, there's no way they would fund that, because that doesn't have anything to do with pedestrians getting safely across. So it was all about getting pedestrians safely across to the new sidewalk that we extended up Epping Road.
Got it. So this grant, the grant writers for this, success for them was sidewalk, not road.
Yeah, I wrote it. Yeah, it was all about sidewalks. I didn't know about.
I mean underwriters.
It's all about pedestrians.
Yeah.
Pedestrian safety.
Got it.
And alternative modes of transportation, not the vehicular. That's what this grant is fund. It doesn't fund, anything to do with roadway projects to improve vehicle flow or, increase capacity on roadways. It doesn't. That's not going to be successful. It doesn't meet the criteria for the grant.
Got it. So any change? Last comment. I swear. Any change to this would technically be a grant. The grant didn't perform. So any change that benefits the town traffic flow kind of goes in the opposite direction of the underwriter's focus of. This is about pedestrians. Anyone evaluating other applications for alternative transportation or transportation alternatives would say, oh, these guys underperform on transportation alternatives. For roads, who cares? Here's your grant. For So when the focus is on roads, it's one thing. So as you mentioned, the roundabout might have helped the town, the vehicular flow better, but that would not be in the purview of this grant. So,
No.
I'm just trying to figure out how.
Yeah, and something like that affects the Epping Road corridor that dramatically, because this was just getting pedestrians safely across to, on that side of Epping Road. That would be more of a corridor study. That's why we engaged in the VHB for their corridor study to look at it, long-term. And there might be, future developments in that intersection that would benefit both, achieve two goals, but that was not the focus of this grant. It couldn't be.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions from the board? Okay, we can open it up to the public now. If you would, state your name and address for the record.
Mark Rollick, 46 Columbus Ave. When I read the minutes of the last meeting, it sounded like there was a lot of focus on traffic studies. If this change was done primarily for pedestrians, was there any type of pedestrian study? Just to kind of see how many people actually are walking in that area and crossing in that area when there's a sidewalk on the other side of Epping Road.
Mr. Sharples, can you answer that question? Or Mr. Haas?
So there will So there was no specific pedestrian count done. We did have video data collection as part of our traffic data collection. There were a few pedestrians in the area, but at the time, the only connection was the sidewalk up Brentwood Road. So it's kind of a build it and they will come type of thing, I guess, to get people up to the other sidewalk that was disconnected. So
Is that the typical study that would be done in a project like this?
to do a pedestrian study,
To do it the way you did it?
our scope was just to do a traffic study at that point. The grant was already under process. We were already building sidewalks to infill between those that had been constructed further up the street. So,
Okay,
answer the question.
thank you.
And I'm wondering what the advantage would be when it comes to determining whether to put a stop sign on Brentwood Road. Why wait for the lines to be put in and any kind of striping that you mentioned?
Sure. No, I asked Mr. Sharples if we could do that now. He mentioned the striping, but I think we came full circle that he indicated that there's no reason to wait.
And I think if you put a stop sign in there, at least you'll see, or people that want to change it, see if that helps.
Agreed.
It is very difficult, and we're not in the busy traffic season just yet.
Mm-hmm.
It's very difficult coming off of Columbus to get, if you want to go up Epping Road, to get over to that lane to take the left. Yeah, that's an alternative, but
That's where they're coming.
right. So, on the south end of Columbus, where it intersects Winter Street, I find that intersection very difficult to go through. And with this change in the traffic pattern, I've noticed increased traffic on Winter Street. So an already difficult intersection has become worse.
I'm sorry? Mr. Sharples, did you want to comment to that?
Yeah, when we did the traffic impact analysis and looked at potential, and these are assumptions, because you don't know until people drive it where they go, but we assumed most people would go to Winter Street. And we discussed that, and the engineers felt, and I frankly agreed that intersection, if you're coming down Columbus, what you're seeing is you're more traffic on Winter Street because they're not cutting through Columbus. The most unsafe way to access that intersection is from Columbus, in our opinion, because you don't have any sight distance up Winter Street, because there's a fence there and so forth, and there's blocks. So now we felt we were taking those people away, and it's safer to enter from Winter Street, the intersection. So we felt, although that's not a way to solve that intersection, we felt we improved the safety of that intersection by not funneling those 900 cars, from Columbus into that intersection at that point. That's what we assumed. But I know Paul Vlasic, I talked to him a couple weeks ago, that is an intersection that they have been studying as part of the intersection improvement program. I actually sent him a sketch of what I thought might be worth an alternative exploring, and they've been exploring some options as well. So we definitely understand about that intersection. That's not a very good intersection.
Okay, thank you. Sir, thank you for your questions. Thank you.
Hi, Christine Pacito, 64 Columbus. I got stuck the other day trying to go back to work because a tractor trailer that didn't stop at Brentwood Road completely blocked Columbus. I was stuck for 3.5 minutes with cars behind me and I couldn't go forward. So now all the trucks that used to go back and forth on Columbus are using Winter and Washington. And I don't even think those roads are constructed for that. I don't think that they're the right class road for those big trucks like McCoy's, the wreckers that bring cars to Cody's, the delivery trucks for the bowling alley. And they're wide and they're long. So that intersection with one of those trucks coming out of Brentwood Road completely prohibit without a stop anybody exiting Columbus. I know that you're talking about striping and looking at it from the sky, maybe you can see it, but when you're on Brentwood Road and you go straight across, it looks to me like it would be right smack in the middle of the left turn and the right turn lane. It doesn't look like there's enough room with curbs and sidewalks. And it's not school buses, and it's not winter. I mean, it's basically like one lane now. So I completely agree we need a stop sign there, but I'm also doubly concerned with the extra, pedestrians were always on Winter, people walking their kids, pushing baby carriages, on Spruce, on Washington, there's lots of kids. And now all of that traffic is on those streets. So, I never saw people, yes, cyclists, at the Brentwood, Epping Road, Columbus intersection, but not walkers. People avoid it. So I agree with Mark. Is it possible to see who uses it on foot or on bikes? Because it really doesn't certainly seem any safer for automobiles. Therefore, I don't think it may have been intended for pedestrian and bike safety, but I don't really think it turned out that way. Maybe I'm wrong, but it doesn't seem to be the case.
Mr. Sharples, could either you or Mr. Haas answer her question about the roads that she referenced with respect to whether or not they can handle those trucks, and then also a follow-up study on pedestrians, bicyclists, and is there an increased volume now that the sidewalk is completed?
So I'll take the first question on the roads themselves and whether they're designed to handle the traffic. Speaking with the town engineer, Paul Vlasic, the other day, he informed me that all three, Winter, Washington, and Columbus, are all town collector roads, so they all have the same rating as far as the volume and the type of traffic mix they can handle. Specifically, some today have more than others, but they're all rated for the same type of vehicle mix.
And that includes the weight of the
I don't know specifically what those roads are built of, but yeah, town collector roads generally can have the same type of vehicles unless they're posted for some reason.
There's an 8 limit on Washington Street.
Right, so if they have a weight limit.
Nobody takes any notice.
Right.
But a wrecker's higher than 8 ton.
Yeah, we need Buxton water trucks.
Oh, yeah, they're well over. I mean, I talked to Chris from McCoy's and
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
My understanding of the no-through trucking rules are that if the truck is making local deliveries, that it's not counted as a truck over the allowed weight. That is something that is subject to a lot of debate all the time, but what happens is you get local deliveries, so it's allowed.
Okay.
Dave, you want to answer the follow-up on the follow-up studies? What was the other question?
Mr. Sharples, I believe the question was relative to whether there'll be any type of a follow-up study as to how many pedestrians and cyclists are now using the sidewalks that they're constructed for any...
Generally, without going out, and I've done this a bunch of times, is going out and just sitting in your car for an hour with a notebook and chalking pedestrians and cyclists. Is generally, there's no pedestrian counter. There's no bicycle counter. There's traffic counts. You can get vehicles, but also it's I've been pushing. Like Ria's, how do how much pedestrians does a business generate? Because you have the traffic manual that tells you, okay, if you have 10,000 square feet of office space, it generates on average X amount of vehicles per hour or whatever, and it has all those. They don't have any of that information for pedestrians. The reason behind this. Sidewalk, which I assume people will use, I see people walking up the other side of Epping Road, was the planning board, before I got here, it had just been approved, and then I came on board. They required the developer to build I think it was like 310 feet of sidewalk along their frontage at 80 Epping Road. It's right across from the meeting place, right where Aroma Joe's is. And it was getting constructed when I started working here, and I heard a lot, the sidewalk to nowhere, And so, and then I heard of some people asking for a crosswalk because they wanted to get to Great Bay kids. So, but then that's not a safe place to put, it's a mid-block crossing on a 35-mile-an-hour road, unsignalized. That's difficult. So that's why I incorporated it into the grant. I said, okay, there's 91 new residents right behind Aroma Joe's, Great Bay kids. There was some neat, the planning board required this sidewalk, and people were asking to cross it to get on that side. And I was like, well, now they don't have to. They can, cross back or be on that side and walk right up. So I generally we don't go back to to count pedestrians, but certainly could
is there any technology? Short of having you sit in your car, that doesn't.
I'm not aware of any. That's what I've done. With this grant, I wanted to see because people were asking for a crosswalk at Winter Street. Epping Road intersection, and some people said nobody crosses there, and then some people, I always cross there. So I went there and I sat there, probably 5 different times for about an hour, and I would say there was probably 2 crossings every hour there when I was there. So. Is it? But then the age-old question.
Build it, will they come?
Well, do you build it? Will they come? But how many is enough? Like if 3 people use that sidewalk a week, is that good? Is 20? Do 100 people have to use it? I don't know the answer to that.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, Selena McIntyre, Arbor Street. I actually wrote a letter to you guys after a really fun near miss at the Columbus Ave intersection there, the one that we're not talking about that funnels everyone into that intersection. So, and I know that we can't do anything about that imminently, but a couple thoughts, and with one that I brought up previously was double-sided parking on Winter Street. It's scary. we at least have to take it down to one side of the street. And if you don't do it now, you have to do it before snowbanks. Because when a water tanker truck comes down and there's people on either side of the street, and then double people coming down, and people are going Mach 4 because they're super annoyed that they have to go all the way around, that has to be done before the winter happens, just so none of us get killed or squished between a water tanker truck. And the other thought is public notices. I know that you guys said you did a great job of trying to get it to everybody that's direct abutters, and thank you for doing that, but I live in Arbor, but this very much affects me. So maybe sending it out to the town-wide, at least as a general notice of this might affect a traffic pattern. If I see a symbol that says my town, I'm gonna open it. So that might have given us more information ahead of time and a little bit more information. Just a thought. Thank you.
Thank you.
Deborah Vasconcelos. I live on 22 Spruce Street. I know this was done for pedestrians, and I walk all around that area, and I have never had any difficulty getting across Columbus or even across Epping. And I don't see a lot of people in my company as I am walking, to be honest with you. The other thing is, just last week, I saw 2 misuses of that intersection. Someone coming off of Epping, taking a right as if they were going up to Brentwood, took a U-turn and went down Columbus. The other one was somebody came off of Epping, went past where you would exit Columbus and entered Columbus that way. Like Christine said, my concern is once school starts, we already know the traffic backs up there. I think buses are really going to be challenged to turn over there onto Epping Road. I don't know if there was any consideration taken into that. No doubt we know that that's been a dangerous intersection, right? We've got a few of them in town. The other thing I'd like to say is I do want to thank Mr. Sharples. It sounds like he did make a genuine effort in all of what he did. And I remember hearing some talk about this intersection a few years ago, and then I just felt like I didn't hear anything again. And I know that abutters have the loudest voice, as they should, but this intersection impacts a large population of this town, especially on this side of the tracks, right? And on the Epping Road side. And I think it would have been really, really important to do what this other woman had mentioned, is to really get this out so that people could share their voice and be heard. I live on Spruce Street, and we have a family with some severely disabled children, and the traffic has increased because what people are doing now is going down Washington, turning down Spruce to get to Winter or Columbus. And so, and part of Spruce is one way, right? So that it's just creating a lot of havoc, and I have concerns about that intersection because I don't see it being any safer. I see it as being more dangerous, and not just dangerous right at that intersection, but for what it's doing to the community around that intersection. So, thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Mr. Haas?
To respond to the question about school buses, so we look at an intersection, look at what we call design vehicles. What are the vehicles that are predominantly using those intersections? So in the case of this intersection, it was a school bus and the fire trucks. Those are generally the largest vehicles using it, so we try to design the features so that they can make those movements comfortably. So that's the case with those two. For a larger vehicle like a tractor trailer, they'll have to use all the pavement like they typically would have to do and swing out into the lanes. But the school buses and the fire trucks are designed to actually make it more comfortably.
So you really think a school bus can go left while another car's going right?
No, they will have to use both lanes there.
Right.
So and again, this is...
Traffic is slowed down.
Yep. It was recognized to be a safety improvement, not a traffic congestion and capacity improvement. So that is the trade-off.
What might be good is if someone on a school day in the morning sits on that road and sees what goes on.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comment, and I'm not sure if you were here for the last meeting, but I think that some of the concerns the board had was the traffic study, and certainly we'll be looking into that for future projects. Thank you. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, sir. Jim Christensen, 57 Washington Street. We're right at the corner of Washington and Spruce. There has been an increase on Spruce, which really was a great pedestrian street, still is. I appreciate it, but it seems like we had a solution. We were looking for a problem by trying to get that traffic across there, because now there's impacts on other streets. So I understand we're quite a long ways in the process, but was there ever any traffic counts on Spruce at all? Because it seems to us that live on Spruce that it has picked up, and there's a lot of traffic now that's taking a left at that intersection down by your house, then coming up Spruce, taking a right to get out on Brentwood Road, because they can't take a left on Brentwood Road. And there's enough of that. And then if there's any way that if there's a traffic study, I'd be interested to see what the impact has been. But more importantly, as Andrew had mentioned, if we could slow the traffic on Washington, that intersection, there's no stop sign at Spruce and Washington. That'd be a great place if you had even a three-way stop there to slow the traffic down, because it is cutting through and churning through to get over to Winter. But thanks.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Haas?
So there was specifically no count done on Spruce Street, but we did have a volume for what was coming up Columbus and taking a left onto Brentwood Road. It was only 4 cars during the PM peak hour, so that was the thought, is that those 4 cars now would have to turn left onto Spruce and go up Washington. It sounds like maybe there's a bit more than was projected.
That was the bogus traffic study that was the one day, one Tuesday.
Correct.
Yeah,
Yep. In August, which yep. So as I mentioned at the last meeting, that count was done in August. It was adjusted, or it was evaluated if it needed to be adjusted based on the best available local data, which was based on a count on 101, recognized not the perfect count, also some in local surrounding towns. Based on the best available data at the time, acquiring seasonal traffic data is a costly operation. You'd have to acquire counts throughout the entire season. For a project of this goal of safety, it was not deemed to be part of the scope. So, and I do understand that the recent quarter study also evaluated data in the area and found that traffic throughout the year did not seem to fluctuate much. That counts done in the summer were pretty similar to those in the fall and in the spring.
Sure. Mr. Haas, I'm not going to belabor the issue because we already went through this last month. I just think picking the week before school starts in August in this town, in that area, was probably not the best time. So, but we've stipulated that.
Yep, just to add one more thing to that. I mean, it was based on where we were in the process. We were moving along. We found out that people wanted this option. We had to get it studied to keep the project moving.
Okay.
So then we try to adjust as best as we can from there.
Well, another week or two would have been okay. But
So just a quick question. I just want to make sure that, so as of right now, the recommendations coming from residents is looking at a stop sign, possibly a 3-way stop sign. What else?
Well, there's the stop sign at Brentwood Road that Mr. Sharples talked about, and Mr. Christensen, you talked about the 3-way stop sign. Mr. Sharples, is that something else we can look at?
That would be a stop sign at the corner of, there's a T, Washington and Spruce.
I certainly can carry it forward. I mean, I don't have generally anything to do with intersections, stop signs. I mean, I wrote a grant. I received a grant for sidewalks.
I understand that.
And here I am. I don't have any problem with dealing with it, but when we're talking about different intersections and other stop signs, I can carry it forward to DPW as they would evaluate.
Fair enough. And I think, Mr. Dean, I think the Brentwood Road is done. We've agreed that we could put a stop sign there, but I think Mr. Sharples is right. Could we have somebody from DPW at our August 2nd meeting to discuss the 3-way stop?
Sure, we can do that.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that we have clear points that we can follow up on, transparency on what's being asked of and what we're going to follow up on and who can actually do that, because, you know, grants.
The board, as the regulators of the right-of-way, basically have the say over where stop signs go, but normally you'd act on Public Works' recommendations.
Right.
Okay.
Robert Ficara, 6 Columbus Avenue, Exeter. If I could, Mr. Haas, you mentioned the car count showed 4 cars on Columbus Avenue. Can you tell me what time of day that was?
It was PM, I want to say 4:30 to 5:30.
On a Tuesday afternoon?
So the PM count was done 4 to 6. Exactly what the peak hour within that time frame was. It's not possible off the top of my head, but somewhere between 4 and 6.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chairman, I don't mean to rehash things that were brought up a couple of weeks ago, but there are some points that I would like to make, if I could, please. The intersection at Columbus, Winter, and Railroad Ave was brought up by a couple of people, and I would just like to state a letter was sent to the Select Board to your attention in 2017 expressing concern about that intersection. Then a letter was also sent just 3 months ago about that intersection. I know that the wheels of justice turn slow. That intersection is horrible. And for traffic to be funneled into that intersection from someplace else is, in my opinion, irresponsible. The town owns the property that cannon sits on. I think that a rotary would be a great thing to put there. There's plenty of room. We own that property. End of that discussion. Ms. Cowan, we were fortunate enough to go around our neighborhood door to door, and we talked to people about this project in 2018, I believe. And then you were good enough to moderate a meeting of all of the neighbors. I don't know if we ever established a list. There were probably 20 people at that meeting. And my understanding is that the neighbors were very much opposed to this happening and traffic being funneling. And we had people from all of our streets. We had some of these people that are here now. And at the end of the meeting, the expression was that this was going to be brought to Mr. Sharple's attention, which he has admitted there was his knowledge that we had that meeting. Is that correct?
Dave, do you know that?
I remember you being told there was a meeting, but then no one ever reached out after.
And you were told that there was some concern about this project and the neighbors did not want it. I believe you and I had a conversation about that about a month ago.
Yeah, I didn't hear what the people said. I was referring to a meeting when I came and visited you at Shooter's.
So Ms. Cowan told you about a meeting but didn't tell you what the results of our conversations were? She just said, oh, I had a meeting with people in the neighborhood?
They had questions, concerns. That's what I heard.
Okay, thank you. There's been a lot of talk of cars at that intersection at this meeting. This was supposed to be a pedestrians project, apparently. There was little attention paid to how many pedestrians actually use that area, and more concerned about car crashes and car traffic. And I mean, what are we talking about here? Might I ask, what is the length of that crosswalk that's there now that was put in?
The one across the new intersection?
65 feet?
Give me a sec.
According to my tape measure, it's actually 67 feet. That's all right. My point being is this was brought up last time. If people are trying to cross that street, if you have a child on a bicycle and you're pushing a stroller and you're trying to cross that new channel that's been put in there, and you get stuck in the middle of that, because while I was out measuring that intersection, there was no car coming from the 101 direction on the Epping Road, and by the time I finished just dropping a 35-foot tape measure down, I had to get out of the road because a car was coming and he wasn't stopping for me. So now we've got somebody trapped in between those streets in this island,
And we're going to have to wait 18 months to figure out how we're going to make those people safe. Because that's the way the wheels of justice move. That's the way red tape and bureaucracy move when a mistake is made. I'd also like to know what procedure decided that 4 stripes of paint was not a better idea than $250,000 to build that thing. $250,000 over 4 stripes of paint for crosswalks? That was option 1. Do we have that much money in this town? Sure. Let's do this. And let's close traffic off to the bowling lanes, which is really, honestly, is the least of my worries. My worries are these people that live on these streets. I had to give directions to a woman the other day who was coming with her grandkids. I didn't know how to get her here because I felt bad I was going to send her in front of the Condrat's house. If this ends up getting put to the voters, how much information are the voters really going to have? They're going to look at what is on the ballot, and they're going to say, why would I spend more money to take something down that just got built? Because they won't have all the information that those of us that live on these streets have. So putting it to a vote, you might as well forget it. I respect everybody's time. I thank you very much. This isn't about waiting 18 months to fix something that shouldn't have happened. And I understand, I respect the process that Mr. Sharples went through, that the engineers went through. I am not an engineer. I'd like to know where all those flyers went that we all got. But this is about safety in our neighborhoods, and once school starts up and once snowbanks come into town, we're talking about safety, and I don't care how many cars you said got in an accident at that intersection. I've owned the bowling lanes for 35 years, and I've never seen one, which doesn't mean it didn't happen. But what I'm saying is this was supposed to be a pedestrian project. And if somebody has to sit in their car and count how many people are walking on that sidewalk, then that's due process. That's the way it's done. Hire a nice high school intern who's looking to get into engineering for a career. I would have gone to do it. I apologize for raising my voice. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Fakar. One thing I'd like to ask Mr. Dean. Mr. Fakar, I don't know who you were referencing when you said you. I know the letter that we received 3 months ago, and we are looking at the intersections. When you said you, I'm not sure if you meant me or the select board in 2017, because I wasn't on the board in 2017. So, Mr. Dean, do you recollect that board, that letter that he's referencing? I mean, I'll own the one that we received 3 months ago, Rob, because we're working on that. But I'd like.
You just got. I just sent another letter last week.
Right.
No, I was referring to 2017, and I'm sorry, I meant the select board. It was sent to the select board, it was sent to Mr. Dean.
Do you remember that? We'll have to go back.
I don't recall it, but I'd have to go look.
Actually, it was sent to Mr. Clement.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Martin Mulray, 105, 107, Washington. Standing here listening to all this, I'm listening to all these studies being conducted regarding cars. Has there ever been a pedestrian hit and injured at this intersection? I know there's a record of how many accidents have been involved with different cars, but as far as pedestrians, I don't even know if anybody has ever been injured up there. Quick word on the layout of this. The gentleman said that when we conducted the study, they took the length of buses into consideration. I'm involved in the construction business, and I know an 18-wheeler flatbed truck isn't going to make that intersection. If it's coming down Brentwood and needs to go out Epping, it's not going to make the turn. There's a pole right in the middle of the island, right where your pedestrian people are supposed to be standing. This trailer is going to move across that intersection and it's going to pin people up against the pole. And if it doesn't do that, people are going to have to get off the safety of the island, and then there's cars coming back down Epping. As far as the design of the island itself, it's about 18 feet going up Brentwood, which stops any traffic going down Columbus. The stop sign down at the intersection, it won't do anything for the people up in Washington. You've turned that into a racetrack. It's dangerous. I like to be out in my garden. I have to park my truck out in front of my house to give me some kind of protection. I'm on the corner of Brentwood and Washington, and it's getting ridiculous. There's young kids, wide out loud exhausts. When you did the sewer work on the street, it was only half repaved, and every cutting across the street, every truck, every car, every trailer rattles, the noise above there. This has been a big mistake, and I think everybody realizes it. This intersection doesn't just affect one street. It affects Columbus, Winter, Washington, Spruce, Mackenzie, and everybody in there. I ask you respectfully just to reconsider this one. I know it's going to cost some money. That's on you guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sandra Angelone, and I live at 84 Washington Street. And I'm at the end where it's Brentwood. And we have no sidewalks, 5 houses on one side, 6 on the other. And we have absolutely no sidewalks at our end. A lot of the drivers are irritated and they start at our end. And it's similar to if they're going on to a highway, the speed that they take off in. The other thing that I wanted to draw attention to is I'm a retired UPS driver, and I've been through safety schools. And when I come down to the intersection where you would take from Brentwood to go onto Epping, even a truck that a resident would use, if they position themselves off to the left, they block any access or visual from the person on the right. They either have to stay to the backside of the telephone pole, or they have to move forward. Once they move forward, they put their vehicle to block off, and therefore it's what do I want to say? It's choking off the flow of what's intended to keep all this excessive traffic going. And the angle that they repositioned it at made it worse. The way it was before, that person on the left could move, therefore the person on the right could move. If one person gets beyond that telephone pole, and I'm sure you know the situations change rapidly when you're on a busy road like Epping Road. So if somebody tries to go forward, there's a potential for an accident there. And to add to that, I don't see how the pedestrians are getting access because the cars are so aggressive in that little area. So, thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comment.
Thank you, residents. You're the best. You really are. That's why we're here. So.
Keith Conrad, 49 Winter Street. My street has taken the brunt of this redesign. Was there a study for accidents on Winter, Washington, Columbus, or Spruce for accidents?
Mr. Dean, do you know the answer to that?
I do not.
Okay. It was mentioned earlier that to maybe make winter.
I think I'm sorry, I think, not to interrupt, I think Mr. Haas answered the question.
I'm sorry, Mr. Haas, I didn't hear you.
We had data from the police department when we did our study back in 2018, and as Dave mentioned, there was a recent study of all the intersections in town.
Great,
Not
thank
just
you. I'm sorry.
I mean,
I didn't hear you.
the accidents itself now, and we're going to see it on Winter Street. That's what I'm saying. I know it was mentioned earlier to maybe make Winter a one-way, and she meant to know, do not do that. And I know we've got a lot of cars parked on the street because of McCoy's. I parked there personally on the street, so these cars can't fly down the road. So it was mentioned that you can only get one car through. We do that on purpose. They're going too fast. I know there was 49 down at Washington speed. I guarantee you they're going down 60 on Winter. Guaranteed. The other day, I was watching the traffic the other day. Thank goodness my kids are grown. Somebody had just mentioned that the kids are walking. That's a neighborhood full of kids now. Thank goodness my kids are grown. And by the way, thank you for the sidewalks. That was a great job. I wish they were there when my kids were younger. They're all grown up, but I just see these young families walking up and down Winter Street, and it's a shame. Because I saw if you go to the top of Winter Street around 5:30 any day now, you just watch that back up now. Everybody's coming, filtering right through. They found the cut through all right, and it's our road. So I would suggest that the $700 registered mail that it would have costed would have probably saved $250,000. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
Hi, Ann Sermon, 14 Cullen Way. I just had a couple of questions about, again, the procedural part of this. Are the select board tonight going to vote on whether or not to deconstruct that intersection? I guess is part of it. Because I'm kind of, we've been all over the map tonight, a lot of interesting input here. Because I wanted to kind of get back to that, like what is going to be the overarching question answered tonight, is part one. Then part two is the stop sign option. Sounds like that's something you might be able to do. And how does that weigh into the vote you're going to take? So I just want to make sure I'm following this, because I read the whole packet. I read a lot, because I was on the select board in 18, and I remember when this came up initially. And I also drive through that intersection quite a bit, and I can tell you from all the years I've been driving through it, before it changed, nobody ever read the sign that said, "Do not block intersection." I think you all know this as well as I do. I'm over on Kingston Road, but I come through there all the time, and that was my biggest complaint to everybody. The police, anytime I could see them, was, could you put a policeman out there, because so back then, no one's doing that. They were all blocking. I'd be the only one sitting there when it was my turn, and I'd let the person from Columbus Ave go through. But most people, they put the two cars would sit and block, and people were trying to come in here. So I'm trying to kind of turn the time machine back. If we were all the same people here talking about that intersection before, if someone said, let's have a meeting of everybody coming in before and air the grievances of what was wrong with it then, there was plenty wrong with it then. I just kind of want to just reset a little bit here, because there's nobody wrong in this room. No one has said a thing that's incorrect here tonight. And I wanted to come here tonight to speak to the fact that first of all, just in reading it and remembering it all, there was no bit of detail not performed by our town planner. I mean, the level of detail and him going above and beyond in notification whether people got these flyers or not, that's really a shame. They should have gotten them. Our tax bills aren't sent out certified, and we certainly do get them. So I don't know if that was the answer, because we certainly get our tax bills. So in the second part of this, we're talking about all the people that are affected by the intersection, but I also want to talk about the taxpayers, all the taxpayers who will be paying for this huge amount of money. If we do this, if you go back to this option one, or you literally go back and do something else at square one, huge fiscal impact to all the taxpayers of the town. So I just want to make this a bit of a macro conversation. It isn't just about you can say just. I know there's thousands going through that intersection, but there's also a lot of people in this town that pay the bills, and I think that's gotten a little bit forgotten in a lot of this conversation. And I want to just bring it back that I want to make it safe for everyone, and I support everybody here, but we need to think about how to do that. And if it's a stop sign to start, to see what's what, and keep what you finish this thing, for one thing. I think you need to finish it, frankly. Finish it. Get that stop sign in there and go from there to the next step, because you really need to look at the holistic part of this. And it's not just, how are we going to do it better next time? We're in the right time right here. And Mr. Sharples did his due diligence, and all of these folks did their due diligence, and we don't necessarily like the outcome, but that may not have been because anybody did anything incorrectly. I think we're just getting too caught up in people forgetting how it was even in the before time. And I just want this to be considered by the entire town before any major step is made. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sermon.
Leslie Haslam, 15 Columbus Avenue. The previous speaker's comments make me think about a couple of things. A, I've lived on this street for really almost 40 years, and it was messy. There was doubling up, there's no question about it. But I felt safer then than I do now. I'm really hoping that this stop sign on Brentwood Road is going to be installed right away, because I saw today somebody coming in the wrong way and turning up Columbus Avenue and coming in from Epping Road. I'm now driving down Winter Street way more than I used to, so. Exactly, and I'm waving to you, Keith, every time, but I drive slowly. So, we all know that this has been really not a good situation, and I'm not an engineer. I'm a retired educator. I'm a homeowner. I pay those taxes, and now I'm on a fixed income, so I'm very mindful of that as well. And I really, really wonder, is there a way to, it maybe isn't version 1, but deconstruct and paint and not have it be $250,000. I mean, that completely blows my mind, and I'd really like to have more consideration. No disrespect to the engineers. I know that, going through the steps, especially with the grant process, there's so much to it to really work at jumping through all the hoops to make sure it's correct, but there's got to be a simpler way, which leads me to the Winter Street, Columbus Railroad Avenue intersection. Mr. Sharples, I think you made reference to there's already discussions going on with Paul Vlasic, the town engineer. Mark made suggestions right off the bat. There was other things talked about tonight about Rotary, that space there. How can we move that forward, that discussion, and make sure we're all included? Because it is way more dangerous, way more dangerous. I've had 2 near misses in the last week there for me, just trying to get off my street. I think we all know it's really bad, but moving forward with that, can we have a multi-step way at communicating, pulling people into the process, so that one can be done correctly the first time? Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public before we bring it back to the board?
Can I have 2 more seconds?
Of course.
Andrew Elliott, 42 Washington Street. So I think I've seen people just come down, I know I've seen people coming down and just still turning onto Columbus Street. All there is a sign that says no U-turn. People are doing it. I mean, it's literally 3 feet of concrete. I can go get a saw and chop that right off. It's really not that complicated. And then people could use Columbus again. It wouldn't fix the right turn issue, but the stop sign and cutting off 3 feet of concrete is not $250,000. Yep. I am an engineer, and I think that would work just fine. So.
Any other comment from the public? So seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board. Comments or questions from the board? So I think a couple of the things that we've heard tonight that we can do in the short term the Brentwood Road stop sign, obviously, Mr. Sharples will, I know you're not the stop sign guy, but we don't, no. We'll get word back to DPW. Mr. Dean, reaching out to Public Works about the possible three-way stop sign that was discussed, and also before public comment had opened, I had asked you to reach out to DPW, Mr. Vlasic, Highway Department, to look at any possible improvements that can be made. And Mr. Elliott, who just left, made a good observation. Maybe having DPW come back with any suggestions that they can make. I think Selectwoman Roundtree Olaf earlier had made a good point about trying to reach out again to other folks in the area. I mean, we have very good representation here tonight, but I think you're correct, and I don't know, Mr. Sharples. We were just talking about Selectwoman Roundtree Olaf's suggestion earlier about reaching out to neighbors to try to get input, or, I mean, we have a good representation tonight. I know our concern was, making a hasty decision without speaking with collectively. I don't know. I mean, I don't have a solution. Reaching out via mail, knocking on doors. We have a communications committee. I don't want to wait till their next meeting. I mean, I want to try to do something that maybe we can brainstorm as to how to reach out to the community. Members of the board, if you have any suggestions.
Recruit us. We'll help. Use us.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'd want to be clear, and because when you do these projects and you look at who do you need to get involved? Like, there's always like, where do you draw the line, and wherever you draw the line, the person on the other side of that line is going to say they're impacted by this. You'd probably include everyone that lives Brentwood Road, or any of the offshoots, Deer Run, any of those people, because they use that intersection probably every day. So we're probably talking, a couple thousand people. So, I mean, knocking on doors might not be feasible. If you tell me, oh, no, we only want to look at this block, you take a map and you say, these are the people infected. I mean, I would want to be clear on that. Maybe I can brainstorm off the,
it's a fair question.
Who is it? And then how would we do that, depending on how big that is?
Well, first, we have to figure out what is it that you want to know? What do we need to follow up on that we didn't find out the first round that leaves us in the position that we're in today? We'll pay the $800 for certified mail to communicate to people. Here's what we're asking you to do, whether it's an online survey, whether it's return this form. I don't know what it is, but
on that though, I mean, I'm just thinking out loud. I mean, everybody, we have folks in the room here from the neighborhood, and though the concerns were very similar, they were all unique in a way. We have somebody from outside the neighborhood that spoke this evening, and Ms. Sermon, you did ask me a question. I haven't forgot. I will answer it, but I think Mr. Sharples, you're right. I mean, it affects the entire town. You all live there, so you have that direct impact. Others drive through there, so they're affected. You have delivery trucks. You have commercial vehicles. You have, so I think, Mr. Sharples, you're right. Like, what are we trying to get, and from whom? Are we trying to get more input from neighbors or abutters to the neighboring streets? I mean,
I was hoping you would tell me that.
I'm talking out loud. So Ms. Thurman had asked, are you going to vote tonight? And the answer to your question is, I don't know. First of all, I was waiting for it to come back to the board, but what are we voting on? We have some options. We have costs. We have potentially other neighbors that may like it. I don't know. I mean, I know who's here. And, that's the problem we had 3 or 4 years ago, frankly, with, whether somebody got a flyer or not. And it's not just this project. I mean, this is an ongoing problem for town government for forever. I mean, you send out a notice and people don't show up. And, short of, taking them and bringing them here, I mean, an age-old question, and that's something we've tasked the communications committee with, is how do we get more representation? We've had meetings, we've had select board meetings here with no one sitting here. And, I'm only going to speak for myself. I have to make a vote, or I have to make a decision, and I don't have anybody looking at me. Your input is very important. And, Ms. Sermon, I think you said it. Everybody here had valuable input. Nobody's wrong. I said earlier, I used my closer early, but it was a project perhaps that looked good on paper, that didn't quite come out how everybody thought. So now we have to look at what our options are. And so, I don't know what the wishes of the board are. If anybody, everyone's free to make a motion. And if somebody seconds a motion, we can vote on it. But I don't know quite yet what we're voting on. And I think in the short term, and let me finish my thought. In the short term, we've made a list of some things that we can do. There's small things that we can do, but there's something we can do immediately. Now, what's immediately? Is it going to be tomorrow morning? I don't know, but it's going to be immediate. There's going to be a stop sign put in Brentwood Road. We're going to have DPW look at the three-way stop that you suggested. Again, I'm not an engineer, so it sounds good to me. I've driven through there. I think it will help. It's not going to solve all the problems, but it will help. Now, if an engineer, if Mr. Haas or our own town engineer, Mr. Vlasic, comes back and says, you know what, from an engineering standpoint, that's a bad idea. Well, then I have to consider that, because they're the experts. I'm not an engineer. But I think it's worth the town doing its due diligence to have our own Department of Public Works, our own town engineer, take a look at what's done, including that three-way stop, including the curbing that Mr. Elliott referenced. Again, that sounds like a good idea too. So let's start there. In the meantime, we can try to find a way to reach out to folks and try to get some other suggestions, get some other people in here. I'm glad Joel came back, but now we need to hear from others. And I don't know. I mean, to me, since you've last been here, I've had sleepless nights because I empathize. I live in a neighborhood too. And I understand everything that you're saying. Public safety is the number one priority here. Yeah, tax dollars are important. Federal grants are important. Future projects for the town are important. But public safety's first. And we all know the traffic study probably could have been done, should have been done differently, in my opinion. I think you feel the same way. So we learn from that. Doesn't help us right now, but we're moving forward, we learn from that. But let's start with these small but important steps to improve and continue the conversation. But there are other board members here, and if somebody wants to make a motion or ask further questions or has other suggestions, that's why we're all here. So, Selectwoman Round-Tree-Olive?
My only other suggestion or request is that we contact SAU 16 and so that they're aware of the change in bus route before school starts, and they can maybe do a test run before doing the pickup and stop off of kids when it gets crazy. So that's my only other small piece that I think we should do in the interim.
That's a good idea. Mr. Sharples, do you know if, again, I'm picking on you because you're here. Who in the town, if it hasn't been done already, who in the town can notify SAU 16 of the new route if that hasn't been done already?
I can. I mean, I know DPW constantly sends out notifications, and they're on that list. And this project included, those notifications went out. So, but I can help make sure personally that they get contact.
Thank you. And we'll take stop signs away. DPW can do that. Selectwoman Cowan.
Last time we talked about this, I had shared that I wasn't going to vote on anything because I am your neighbor. I live on your street. I know most of you by your dogs. And I bought my house there after we had these meetings and talked about these concerns. So, this wasn't something that I was thinking through when I was buying a house, but boy, am I glad we have the opportunity to be your neighbor. And the thing that I would ask to include on the list of things that you had already talked about is to look at these other streets that are being impacted, like Winter Street. You know, that was a problem before. That intersection that we've already talked about where there's a potential rotary. But if we're not talking about doing that this year, let's talk about other things that we can do to make it safer. On that street, on Washington Street, which I think are going to bear the brunt of what is happening here. And, you know, I've gone door to door with at least 2 people in this room. I'm happy to do it more. You know, I think that we can really, you know, it was a really great experience for me, and it was a huge motivator and why I chose to buy a house on this street. And so, you know, it's not always a comfortable thing to do, but it's really worth it and worthwhile and a great way to get to know your neighbors. And this is uncomfortable. And I hate that we have, you know, that we're in this position and that we're in this position together. But I also think that we can do the things we need to do to make it safer and deal with the repercussions, because, you know, I don't know what we can do. You know, again, I want to say that I feel like I need to recuse myself because of, you know, whatever implications come from this vote. I don't want to be a part of that, but I do want to be a part of the solution and making this better going forward, because it is not, you know, we need to address the safety issues in our town. We need to address, you know, the sort of concentric circles that happen when you change something that's pretty significant in a neighborhood. So I would ask that we include Winter Street, Washington Street. Well, the T.
Railroad.
Yes, that whole mess of an intersection needs to be addressed.
Thank you. Selectman Brown.
Thanks. So I think something we could do immediately is set up like a 10-question survey, put it on the website. Bob Glowacki has been great in doing that on the communications committee, and just basic things, because it is a thoroughfare connecting 2 arterial roads in town. So there's a wide array of people we can ask about different aspects of this. And then just from a logical perspective, it's like the funds and the data gathered were all towards a solution to one problem, and we've definitely potentially created others that will be far more expensive than any of these options. So I think in the short term, we can do even better for data gathering by setting up a survey, putting it on the town site. There's been enough word of mouth with this where that would get a lot of fuel. We'd have at least several hundred respondents, and beyond that, I think we really need to, try to stay as impartial as possible on this and just stay high level. And I think the high level has been the danger of this. We've started a master plan. We've done very high level things. We gathered data towards a known conclusion. We knew we wanted to have alternative transportation solutions. And so we looked at data that justified that, which is, that is what it is. But the moment there's any number of these scenarios talked about, the moment that happens, it's like, well, we've been warned on a number of potential hazards here. So we've got to do due diligence, get more data in from citizens, but we also have to take into account that we've been made aware that we've expanded moving vehicular traffic issues throughout a region of town in trying to solve something that looked really good on paper. So.
Thank you. So, Mr. Dean, it sounds like the Brentwood Road stop sign can be done soon.
Yes, I think so.
The DPW and Mr. Vlasic going out and inspecting not only the 3-way stop proposal, but also the curbing, et cetera. We meet again on August 2nd and also August 16th. I'd like to give them a reasonable amount of time to get something of substance back to us, but I also want some immediacy. So is August 2nd too soon, or is the 16th a reasonable request?
What I'd like to do is maybe check with the department on that.
That's fair.
And to get back with the board.
Okay, that's fair. And then with respect to Selectman Brown's idea for a survey, I'm trying to think who best would be not qualified, but who should be involved from town staff, whether it be DPW.
That's a good question.
Fall into a department. Mr. Sharples
depends on what the survey's asking and the content of the survey. But I think my place where I'd start is Mr. Sharples. I think.
Okay.
With something like that.
But I think Dave needs to have some guidance because we're just giving him.
Yeah, there's nothing written down. So as far as
I think it's what would we need to ask
what it might be.
Like, for the board to revisit this whole thing. What 10 questions would we need to know?
Well, it doesn't have to be 10. I mean, 10 can be overwhelming. I think if you want to.
What one question?
Well, no, do you want somewhere between 1 and 10? But what are we asking? Are we asking whether folks prefer option 2, option 1, nothing at all, tearing it? I mean,
no, I think it's much more tactical. Like, where do you live? Where do you move through? Are you a pedestrian on this street? Do you drive past this way?
I see.
Do you find old pattern to new pattern? Questions that are very tactical. I don't think it's feasible to have people look at other things. There's enough on the ground data now where people know what it feels like to move through there. So the stakeholders are people who move through that area. It's not a theoretical exercise. It's not about draft plans. It's like, here's what is now, because we need data to move on as a board to say we need to stop this right now because we're creating hazards, or if we're going to make a decision like that, if that's what's on the table, is are we going to revisit the whole endeavor? Not, let's look at other things. It's what we have now is almost done. It's all but done. What would be the criteria? What kinds of, because the studies that were done to say, how would we justify a sidewalk here? This is a different exercise. It's how do we justify stopping this thing? So basically, beyond a reasonable doubt, we've created more threat, more hazard. So it's that kind of a survey that would try to figure out, hey, everyone, it's not a situation of do you like it or not? It's done. It may need to be undone. What would we need to know to undo it? That's a big deal, but it's probably very finite. Like, have you almost been hit in the past few days? Yes. If 1,000 people say that, we need to stop this thing. There's simple questions like that, I think, that can inform a board whether it should, revisit its momentum.
Yeah, I know data we track. I mean, I don't know who we'd ask that. I mean, because you're talking about the users and the people that travel through there. And one thing about these roads, they're going to keep increasing. And they probably, I haven't been here, but I'll tell you, the people that can live here say it's been steadily increasing for years. Because these are connector roads that connect different parts of town. So as Riverwoods grows, I'm sure Washington Street got busier and Columbus got busier. And as, the YMCA does an addition, or Linden Commons gets built, or Cypress Circle gets built, nowhere near this intersection, these roads are going to be impacted because these are major connectors in town. So there's that going on with these roadways, with Washington, with Winter, Columbus, and Lincoln Street, those four, it's going to keep going whether, you know what I'm saying, like as development goes. So to try to, I'll have to think about that, if you're trying to get the users that are flowing through that system and ask them, that is a lot of people. That is thousands of people.
But a survey is very easy. It's not about.
It is, and I did a survey once, and I got 876 responses, and that was like tremendous. So usually I get heck of a lot less than that. But I can try to devise, I guess, some questions, maybe. I guess I'd see what are you looking to do? Because if you're looking for a safety and standpoint, you can now all that data you can analyze for crash data and so forth. You can't do near misses because unfortunately near misses there's no record of them. I mean, you can ask people for near misses, but then some people might answer, some people might not. And how reliable is and significantly significant is that data? How much you can rely on? Having done a lot of quantitative analysis in my day, and I believe in the kind of the peer-reviewed approach to quantitative data analysis, and you really have to have a pretty significant sample to consider the data significant to make a conclusion based off of that. So I would probably say that the data that we'd probably use that would be reliable already exists. Like we'd look at crash data on all these different roadways and so forth, and then track it. Have a over time, because the police is great. They can do that. They have a database that they can search and they can pull up time frames and so forth. That involve pedestrians, that involve cyclists, that involve vehicles, that involve injury. So they do track all that information, and you could see that and see, do things get worse over time? But also they're going to get automatically, progressively worse, that may not be connected with this intersection just because the background growth of development. Off Cullen Way, there's there's 24 units going off of Charter Street. That'll definitely impact Winter Street and Washington Street. Yeah, no, that's what I think the solution is you're going to get more capacity on the roads, but then if you do like a complete streets policy, I have that in the CIP, I've had that for a few years now, but hopefully that'll get funding, that you build streets for all the users and it's safe for all the users, and you put traffic calming measures and wider sidewalks and separation between the sidewalks and the thing. But also what you're going to run into But the issues with that is the necessary right-of-way, because when right-of-ways were built and houses were built, they're built, you only got 50 feet and you really want 80. So there are all issues, but, with different things. But we can definitely try to figure that out and make those corridors that are going to get just more traveled safer.
I mean, I appreciate the point, but if we go with just that, if we just look at historical quantitative data and say we're going to go with that, we know that vehicular traffic is dangerous, and it's inherently dangerous to everybody. It endangers other vehicles and endangers pedestrians. We know there's there's accidents on the intersection that was, and now we've created a new pattern, and the residents are saying this is more dangerous. And I get that's qualitative data, it's not quantitative yet. Right. That's fine. We don't have quantitative data on pedestrians because they didn't exist before to the volume they may in the future. But we do know that growth in the towns, if we go by that, then the board does have enough data already to say, look, we've just spread the problem. So, and then the simple solution that's been mentioned over and over is slowing everything down. So if we went to being extreme here, but if we said 10 miles an hour, that's the speed limit everywhere, then all the problems would slow down enough to really parse things out. But it's every division here has their chain of responsibility, and the select board has to decide, okay, money's been allocated, project's almost done, and we're being implored to stop it on the grounds of what? That it's more dangerous. Well, is it the pattern that's dangerous, or the speed that's dangerous, or what is, and there are some easy, like a stop sign sounds like a great solution, but we just came up with it tonight, so that's a little convenient. I just thought of this, let's do it. Quantitative data, that's great. If we go with quantitative data, we know enough to say that vehicles moving along, the Swayze discussion, the same thing. It's one way, this way, that cars are a danger to people who are not in cars, and then cars are a danger to other cars, and we've made a new pattern here, and there's growth, and there's a dense neighborhood here. So again, with one angle, going with that, I appreciate the reminder about the data we have. We have enough data to say, wow, let's pause here. Or we have other solutions, which would be revisit the movement of traffic here, because it's going too fast, period. What if everything were going slower? Would we be having the same discussion?
Yeah, that's one of the things that this reconfiguration did, and for pedestrian safety, is slow down traffic. Because if you're coming up from downtown and you are going on Brentwood Road, you just have to veer left, and you could go through that intersection. I don't want to say how much, but you didn't really have to stop before taking a left. So you're kind of going through that intersection at speed. Whereas now you have to kind of stop after the telephone pole and take a 90 and then navigate a right-hand turn. So you've definitely slowed down the traffic, through that intersection.
And is it the issue that, is this the growing pains of people learning to slow down to get it done? I don't know, but is it a situation of eat your vegetables? The vegetables are, everyone has to go slower.
All the data I know right now, which is, it's not statistically significant because it's only been in operation for just less than 2 months, is that there's been no crashes. And this is an intersection that has crashes consistently in town. It's the third worst vehicular crashes. It did involve, there was a pedestrian injury and a cyclist injury at this intersection. So it definitely has its crashes. Fire departments, like, they're, anecdotal, like we're there all the time. So, and the data does show that of the crashes. So over time, you will be able to tell if this is, gotten safer, but then you want to look at, did you make other places unsafe? Because you never want to do that. You don't want to solve a problem somewhere and create the same or a worse problem somewhere else.
Right, so we can look at the data another way and say that they're not speeding down Washington, they're just moving their behavior from over here to over here. Again, if you take the data, you can do all that. There's one solution that's really enforce better behavior. Another is we're going to shut this down. The board is in a position where we must make a decision one way or another. If we make no decision, we run the risk of something really bad happening in this dense area with a new pattern and old behavior. So it's about the survey. A survey is one way. Another way is to just lean on the data we have and say, look, it's easy to see where this is headed because we're not actually changing anything on the ground.
Yeah, that was a quantitative. If you want a qualitative analysis, I've done those too, and that's through a survey, and but we'll see the number of responses, because so far in this whole process, even with these hearings, I think maybe 15 people spoke, and then before I got probably 30 people input, so we're at like 45 people right now, and it's gotten a lot of interest. So
right, which is small against
I don't know
9,000.
Yeah, but I mean, you look at how many people that vote. I mean, it's the percentage of the registered voters. It's tough to get people out to provide comment. But I'll certainly let me brainstorm it and come back to, I'll get with Russ and see, kind of put something together based on what I'm hearing from you folks and what you need and
if we
give
make
them a couple
no decision
options
now, if we
we'll
do
go
nothing,
from there.
If we do nothing, what we've done is shift the former pattern into the neighborhoods. So we can either address that one pattern or address the behavior. I'm not putting it to you, but just to the board, we can either focus on this the traffic pattern as the problem or on the greater traffic behavior in this region as the problem or some combination of them. I'll stop. Concede the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Sharples. Thank you, Selectman Brown. So, Mr. Dean, you'll circle back with me as to whether or not August 2nd or 16th will work better for staff.
For Department of Public Works.
And that would include maybe separately, independently, Mr. Sharples can get back to you on what he thinks about what you just talked about. Okay, thank you. Any other comments from the board? Right. For those still here, thank you for coming tonight and thank you for your comments and your input and suggestions. And we appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, our last discussion item, Mr. Dean, mobile vending, the first reading of a town ordinance.
Yes, so this agenda item basically follows up on a conversation and action that the board took earlier this year with respect to mobile vendors. And in order to actually get those regulations into the form that they need to be, we're proposing that town ordinance amendment be adopted, and that will memorialize the requirements that the board set up with staff a few months back.
Okay. Are there any questions or comments from the board before we have the first reading? Okay, seeing none, Vice Chair Cowan, if you could pinch it for
I sure
Selectwoman.
can. So Chapter 8 of the Town of Exeter Town Ordinances, ordinances to regulate vendors, hawkers, peddlers, solicitors, and other, oh boy, what is this word? Itinerant vendors and door-to-door solicitations and canvassing is hereby amended as follows. Add 802, and mobile vending. Change 802.2C, Board of Selectmen to Select Board. Change 802.3, Board of Selectmen to Select Board. Delete 802.C.3C. and fax numbers. Add 802.3K, vendors, hawkers, peddlers, solicitors, and other inerrant vendors and door-to-door solicitations and canvassing, or 802.3L. A refundable mobile vendor townhouse common permit fee of $1,200 per calendar year or prorated monthly, payable at the time of application, or 802.3M, period. A non-refundable mobile vending outside of WC and CL downtown district's permit fee of $25 per day, $100 per week, or $250 per year, or any part thereof, payable at the time of application. Change 802.4A, Board of Selectmen to Select Board. Change 802.4A.3, Chief of Police or Designee to required town departments. Change 802.4B, period, Board of Selectmen to Select Board 3 times. Chief of Police or Designee to required town departments. Change 802.6, Board of Selectmen to Select Board 2 times. Change 802.7, Board of Selectmen to Select Board. Add 802.9C, motor vehicle vendors. 1. Mobile vendors shall not conduct their mobile vending business in such a way as would restrict or interfere with the ingress or egress of the abutting property owner or tenant, create, I think that means or become, a public nuisance, increase traffic congestion or delay, or constitute a hazard to traffic, life, or property, or an obstruction to adequate access to fire, police, or town state vehicles. 2. A vendor selling from a mobile unit shall not stop, stand, or park their mobile vending unit upon any public location, public parking space, or public street for the purpose of selling under any circumstances except through the acquisition of a mobile vending permit and/or by the parking ordinances of the town, unless specifically authorized to do so by the Select Board or Designee. 3, mobile vendor is responsible for removal of their own trash. 4, mobile vending units, approved signage, and garbage receptacles must be removed daily. 5, dumping of grease, oil, or gray rotter is strictly prohibited. 6, mobile vending permits must be applied for at least 2 weeks prior to the approved start of business at the permitted location. Blackout dates may apply due to special event scheduling. Additional specifications related to townhouse common mobile vending. 7, unless otherwise approved by the Select Board or Designee, mobile vending will be limited to 6 designated spaces in the public parking lot abutting townhouse common. Parking on green space is prohibited. 8, unless otherwise approved by the Select Board or Designee, mobile vending in the townhouse common public parking lot will be allowed year-round, January 1 through December 31 of the calendar year, specified on the approved permit, Sunday through Tuesday from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m., Wednesday from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m., Thursday through Saturday from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. 9, signage will identify designated spaces as reserved for mobile vendors and will refer potential automobile parking patrons to a website page for access to the schedule of reserved mobile vending dates and times. Violators will be towed at the owner's expense.
Thank you, Selectwoman Cowan. Any public comment?
Mr. Chair, so the Selectwoman Cowan mentioned the create or become. So just for the record, it's correct in the revised ordinance, it's just incorrect in the reading, that's all. So that of is, and then I just would have a note elsewhere, we should probably revisit some of the other language in here. It's kind of archaic about insane and sexual psychopath. Just seems like it was written at a different time. Evidence that the permittee, so reasons for denial may include, it's repeated a couple times in here, referring to applicants who might be insane or sexual psychopath. I think we should.
What page are you on?
So 8024C.
Reasons for this is what we mean about updating our
yes
Yeah,
language.
8024C4, and it's repeated elsewhere as well.
And this is a process of 3 readings, so we can, I meant to say now is sort of the time to
look
if there
through
were
this
things in there that you wanted to flag that you wanted to change or update, modify, or otherwise, this is the process that allows for it. You don't have to adopt after 3 readings. You could do more if you wanted to make some significant changes. But we were focused on, as you know, trying to get the mobile vendor pinned down. So we had that, and we could move ahead with the program. I did want to acknowledge to both Darren Wynnham's work, our economic development director, and also my assistant Pam McElroy, who transcribed this, did a great job, worked very hard on it. So there it is.
Great. Thank you to both. Thank you for the catch.
And I think the rest of that paragraph we should keep, but I agree that we should take out the mention of people being insane or sexual psychopaths.
And that could, and just to follow up on that further, sometimes these ordinances, when they're written, are reflective of the state RSA.
Yeah.
So before, I mean, I understand what you're saying for sure in terms of amending this, but it could very well be that the RSA hasn't been updated and it's reflective of this. So
that's a good point.
But we can investigate that further.
Okay, please. Any other comments from the board? Okay. Mr. Wyndham, thank you again.
Thank you. Can I make a quick statement?
Please.
Just good news. I was downstairs waiting for this to. I wanted to say that there was a ton of people at the band tonight. I was shocked. A ton. Good. More than I've ever seen. So it was really cool to see.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And we missed it.
Before we move into regular business, we'll take public comment.
Yeah, if I could make one more. Rob Ficara, 6 Columbus Avenue. I'm sorry, I wanted to say something before we finished talking about Columbus Ave, but everybody left. I just wanted to bring up, do we need to satisfy the contract with the engineers and the construction company before we can look at doing something else? Are we tied into that construction company for the $250,000 to modify it? We do have a town engineer. We do have a very good highway department. Are those things that, you were talking about what we were going to vote on tonight, and then that just never, we started talking about doing a survey. I think that everybody that's listening to all of this is pretty much in agreement what should happen, but I'm not going to put words in anybody's mouth. But do we need to finish a contract with the folks who have been working on it before we are able to maybe do this in-house properly? And that's all I wanted to say. I know you probably can't answer that right now.
No, we're gonna maybe before. Sorry, Dave.
Just keeps getting.
But I just want to. The second part of your question and comment is consistent with I think what we were talking about as a board. I mean, we've got a very talented town engineer, and we have an incredibly talented DPW, and that's why from the get-go I was, for the short-term things, I would really like them to be more involved. In a long-term process, I would also like them to be involved. I think they should be involved, and they're certainly talented enough to be involved. But to your particular question the question was, are we still tied into the contract with the engineers and the construction crew for the remainder of this project? And I believe, Rob, you meant, would that mean if we moved forward with anything further, like if we did option 1 or tore it down or whatnot, are we still obligated contractually to use that engineer and contractor, or did I understand you correctly?
Or do we need them to finish the job
before?
And then and then we readdress it. I mean, I understand there are contractual obligations.
Yeah, we're all contracted. There
Yeah.
are signed contracts to do what is being done.
Okay.
Yeah, but we can't say to them, okay, yeah, we don't need you anymore, we're gonna do something else. We have to finish what is in writing and what we contracted with them to do, is that correct?
I would assume that's correct.
Yeah.
I haven't, like, the fine print of the contract, but I would assume yes.
So before we decide to do something else, I just didn't, I wanted to ask about that. I'm sorry to prolong the meeting, it's been a long night, thank you. And I just wanted to address that.
Thank you, Mr.
Okay,
Guy.
thank you.
Thanks. Thanks, Dave.
That's it?
That's it.
Thanks, Dave.
Okay, regular business. We do not have any tax abatements or credits exemptions this evening. No permits and approvals this evening. So, Mr. Dean, we can jump right into the town manager's report, please.
Okay, I wanted to make a note for the board, a marker that our meals and rooms estimates we get tax distribution from that meals and rooms tax every year, and in the FY22 state budget, that's actually increased by $268,000, so that's good news. The bad news is we're not going to get our general revenue sharing that was part of our last two budgets, and that's $158,990. So we're on the positive, but it's not quite as great as I would have liked it to be. On the Primex front, we just got notification today, actually, that we will receive a premium holiday, $44,000 for our property liability insurance, which is a good number, and then another $90,000 for workers' comp.
Great.
What they've done is offered us a premium holiday to be applied to the next year's premium, or we can take it in a check. And unless there are any reasons, the board members are opposed, I'd prefer it come in a check to the town. That's the way we would normally do it. It guarantees we get it this year, and it also keeps the budget somewhat stable going forward. So, our bond issue for both the Salem Street and the lagoon cleaning out of the wastewater treatment plant lagoons came in at a true interest cost of 1.49%, so that's great news. That's a 15-year bond, and I do have documents for the board to sign tonight before we break up for the evening. I wanted to follow up on some of the topics from the Swayze Parkway meeting with the trustees. We did that. Greg Bisson from Parks and Rec and Doug Eastman, our code enforcement officer, both went down and looked over the electrical boxes at the Parkway, and we can report that they're all code compliant. There are some lock issues that we're attending to, and that will help us further secure the boxes. So the keys will be held for those by Parks and Rec.
Great.
So we took the initiative on that one. HB 79 is a new law. That's a new requirement for health officers that they must meet with the select board once per year and give a state of the town on readiness on public health threats. And that report goes to the State Department of Health and Human Services, so that you as the Board of Health need to meet at least once a year now with the health officer to go through that process. We have a new police officer. His name is Nicholas Patterson, and his swearing in is August 9th at 9 a.m. here in the Novak room. So if any of the board members are free, you're more than welcome to attend those. If you haven't attended one before, they're pretty good ceremony. And usually we have the families here, and we like to celebrate our new employees that way. Palmer and Sicard is having an open house on July 21st. That's this Wednesday from 2 to 5. It's a ribbon cutting in an open house, so if you're interested in that, board members are welcome to attend that. And then just a reminder, the Police National Night Out is Tuesday night, August 3rd on Swayze Parkway. And then I also wanted to report finally that there was a letter submitted by Public Works to extend the deadlines on the Pickpocket Dam letter of deficiency by 2 years. So they have put that to DES, and hopefully that will bear fruit in the next few weeks or so. And unless there's something else, that's my report.
Thank you, Mr. Dean. Would you remind the board via email of Officer Patterson swearing in? Officer Patterson swearing in?
Yes, I will do that.
Thanks. Okay. Select Board Committee reports. Selectwoman Roundtree Olaf?
No updates.
Selectwoman Cowan?
There was a planning board meeting last Thursday. I was not able to go. I had a health emergency, but I'm fine. And happily have been able to catch up because we tape these. So it's the same continued hearing about the Grisette property with that open space development down on Cullen Way. And then there is another, I think it's 12 single family open space development off of Watson Road, and so we're also deliberating that.
Okay, great, thank you. Selectman Brown?
Yep, I had one meeting I missed, the Facilities Advisory Committee. I watched some highlights. They covered public safety complex design selection, the facilities condition assessment to come to the board with, DPW project list they were going through, and a library update, but I'll touch base with Chris Weeks before our next meeting.
Okay, great, thank you. And I attended the River Advisory Committee meeting on Thursday, and Town Engineer Paul Vlasic gave an update more specific on the Pickpocket Dam that Mr. Dean alluded to, so. Okay, correspondence, all of our correspondence was included in the packet relative to Swayze Park and the Epping Road, Brentwood Road intersection. Reviewing the board calendar, looking out for the next 4 meetings, August 2nd, August 16th, August 23rd, and September 13th. Is that correct, Mr. Dean?
Yes, that's what I have.
All right.
Can you say those again?
August 2nd, August 16th, August 23rd, September 13th.
I will not be local August 23rd.
Okay, we'll make sure we have a quorum. Thank you for letting me know.
Yeah, that's my son's birthday. I'm not sure. 23rd. I may be able to make it still, though.
Okay. Selectwoman Cowan,
Yeah.
I have a motion.
I do. I move that we go into non-public session under RSA 91A:3-2A and C.
Okay, Selectwoman Cowan, you'll have to do a roll call.
Oh,
please.
yep.
Thank you.
Selectwoman Roundtree-Olaf.
I'm sorry?
Second. No,
Oh.
yeah, thanks.
Aye. Yep.
Mr. Chair.
Aye.
Selectman Brown.
Aye.
I say aye.
It's unanimous. We'll move into non-public.
Thank you for tuning in to Exeter TV. Exeter TV is the town's public and government access channels, available on Comcast channels 9